Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Tailosive Tech Live on YouTube. We are once again going to be starting off the stream actually with subjects that were asked by Tailosive Tech Pro members beforehand. So even if they can't make it to the stream, they get their comments answered. That's just one of the perks we offer. But that's kind of what the title and thumbnail is for this stream as well, because Nate Tech basically asked us one question and there's a lot to unpack with it. What improvements? Jasmine asked a bunch of questions, but those are easier to answer, at least for me. So I'll take these one at a time because there's a lot. What improvements would I want for each product that needs to improve on next year for next product launch? So iPhone, and he said say something other than USB-C since it will be coming next year, 2024. So I guess we'll start with iPhone. I guess there's the obvious ones we can get out of the way quickly. I can read off that list, but it's basically all the Apple product category. Excuse me. It's basically all the Apple product categories. So what do I want improvement wise from the iPhone aside from USB-C? I mean, the regulars, I would take the works: better battery life, better silicon, better camera performance, all that stuff's easy. Oh, and thank you, Visualizer, for being a supporter for 13 months. How have I been? I've been good. I've been more disconnected lately, which I appreciate. It's been a good holiday season for me, spending more time in family, more time with family. Sorry, but outside of that, I guess more so than my hope with just USB-C, I guess would be that Apple actually takes advantage of that connector, whether it be not so much, okay, sure, faster charging, faster data transfer speeds, that would be nice. But I would personally really love it if they came up with better use cases for having a higher bandwidth port. Like, I would love to see an Apple version of Samsung DeX where you could dock the iPhone into it, especially now that we're using our iPhones like I am right now as continuity cameras. In that situation, we may be plugging in our iPhones to external monitors or docking them next to external monitors somewhat regularly. So if the iPhone's going to be my webcam, and for some people their microphone, why not take it a step further and say, let's let the iPhone power the display? And then you could just have a studio display that you have your little MagSafe attachment to. You dock your iPhone onto it, and now it's powering a light version of macOS, or maybe just Stage Manager for the first generation. I'm not sure how much faster the A17 chip is going to be, but it's rumored that the A17 chip is going to be built on the 3nm architecture, which means that there should be a bit more noticeable, appreciated jump in performance and efficiencies. And I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but at some point, I feel like, oh, thank you, Unreal Cousins, for 6 months of support. Appreciate that. At some point, we're going to reach uh, a calibration, or a, what do you call it, singularity, where the A series chips are performing close to as fast or faster than the M1 series of chips. I don't know if that's going to be the A17. It's probably a bit too soon, but I think it will be close. Like, maybe the A17 chip can outperform the A12X. So granted, it has the right amount of RAM, it could maybe run a light version of macOS. We know macOS has run on much more dated hardware, considering they're still bringing macOS Ventura to older Intel-based MacBooks that are definitely slower than the M1 chip. So I guess that those kinds of use cases I would appreciate, outside of just the works of better cameras, better battery, faster speeds, brighter display, all that basic stuff. I'm looking more so for future iPhone upgrades. I'm hopeful that they come up with use cases that we're not using the iPhone for, because that's part of the reason I didn't upgrade to the iPhone 14, was just, it's a great phone, don't get me wrong. I still personally believe the 14 Pro Max is the best phone of any kind you can buy. I think it's better than all Androids because I'm a biased Apple sheep and I prefer iOS. It's the most expensive. No, it's not the greatest value, but I will admit that in terms of resale value, how well it ages, how good the camera is, how good the display is, how intuitive the software is, the app store available, the simplicity of setup, and the ecosystem support that the iPhone has. Yeah, the 14 Pro Max is the best phone of all time, but all of it was mostly just enhancements on things I already have with my 13 Pro Max. I didn't find that many use cases that I was like, well, if I have the 14, I can do this, and with the 13, I can't do that. It was more so like, okay, the 14 does everything a little bit better, but is it noticeable improvements that I'm going to appreciate on a daily basis? No, not really. Dynamic Island is kind of cool, but it's not like opening up use cases that weren't there before. So I guess that's my first answer to Nate Tech's question. Sorry, we have a lot going on. Chris says, happy belated Xmas. Thank you. You as well. Um, let's see. Nice to see one of these for a road trip. Hey, Jackson Smith's on the road trip. Do I think a 2018 13-inch MacBook Pro i5, 28 gigs of storage, 8 gigs of bytes of RAM? You got to tell me the actual price, just Kellen. Don't tell me the storage and RAM and the year, but not say the price. How much is it? If it's $500, no. If it's $100, sure. But 128 gig MacBook Pro, I have a hard time recommending that. Should I wait for the 15 Pro next year? I currently have the 11. If you're happy with your current phone, then yeah, wait. If you have to ask, I would say wait. But let me get through this. Okay, so Nate Tech is after iPhone asking about iPad. So I cannot condense into even a 3-hour live stream all the issues I have with the iPad, and I don't want this to turn. It seems like every live stream I do, I eventually reach a point where I'm just ranting about how mad I am at the current state of the iPad. So to me, the easiest thing for improvements, rather than go through a giant list of things they should add to iPadOS, which I could go on infinitely, I could fix all of that just by saying add dual boot macOS as an option. Um, in terms of hardware, I don't have a ton of issues with it. I mean, it would be nice if the iPad 10 supported Apple Pencil 2. I would love it if we could kill off the Apple Pencil 1 for good, and the home button and the lightning connector. But mostly, I think all of my complaints with iPadOS would be solved if you had the option of booting it into macOS, even if it was a very expensive option. Like, you can't do dual boot macOS unless you have 16 gigs of RAM and the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. So it's like only the $1,800 iPads can do it. I'd be like, okay, that's still substantially better than the state we're at now. Because right now, Apple's charging $2,000 for some of their iPads, and they still don't even get a calculator app. So yeah, mostly software changes I want to see. Not a lot of hardware things I'd like to see, other than, I mean, it would be nice if ProMotion came to the cheaper iPads, but we know it's not going to happen because it's ProMotion, right? It's in the name. In terms of Mac, I'm really happy with the current state of the Mac, to be honest. Like, I love my MacBook Pro, and I think they're going to have a very difficult time topping it. Similar to how the chip results of the M2 were not substantially better than the M1. I feel like even with the 3 nanometer architecture, outside of, okay, it's going to be faster, right? Like, okay, the new 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros, whenever those come out, whether it's summer or spring, whenever they come out, they'll be faster and maybe get an hour or two better battery life. What else is there? Like, yes, the silicon is good and it will get better, and I'm excited for that, but I think Apple's going to have a really hard time convincing people to upgrade. Like, to me, this is like a super cycle with the 14-inch and 16-inch MacBook Pros. They just went all out with these things. They gave them mini LED, they gave them 120 hertz, they gave them incredibly fast silicon, they brought back the legacy ports, they got rid of the touch bar, which I don't like, but most people didn't like. So, like, the speakers are amazing. I'm using the microphones on my MacBook Pro right now. That's how you guys are hearing me. It's an amazing microphone system. The webcam was great. I'm sure there's some little things they could do. They could put in a little bit better Wi-Fi. They could put in a little bit faster HDMI ports. But overall, it's going to be very incremental upgrades, even with the massive 3 nanometer chip improvements. So I guess my improvements I'm hoping for in 2023 is that we can definitely kill Intel, like, for sure. In my opinion, they kind of already had killed Intel, because probably all of the Intel Macs on the website right now are not really in production. They're probably all just selling inventory that they have and no one's buying them. So they're just selling out. So I hope that the Mac Pro is priced reasonably and differentiates itself enough from the Mac Studio. I hope that the larger sized iMac could get some love, like an iMac Pro revival. And I'm hopeful for a Pro Display XDR refresh that's more affordable, but high refresh rate and still good dynamic range. So yeah, I guess that counts as the Mac line. Outside of Mac, he said MacBook, which I kind of talked about. AirPods and AirPods Max, I'm pretty happy with the state of most AirPods, other than AirPods Max. Like, AirPods 3 to me is good enough for what you want the cheaper entry-level AirPods to be. Like, you can't really give those things active noise cancellation because that's just going to kill the pros. Like, that's the only reason people buy the pros, really. Um, Outside of that, I mean, obviously, huge, massive changes needed for AirPods Max. I want Type C. I think it should have an audio jack option included in the box. And I'm not usually the guy to defend the audio jack, but it's like, if you're going to keep including it and include better versions of the headphone jack on MacBook Airs and MacBook Pros, and then you're going to sell a dedicated pair of over-ear headphones with wired capability, then yeah, I'm sorry, that should come with that as an option. The price should be a lot lower, of course, and it should support lossless playback, and it should get a dedicated case. So that's my biggest hope. But I'm very happy with the current state of AirPods Pro. Those are amazing, great deal. AirPods 3, good enough for the entry level model, and then selling the old AirPods 2 for cheaper makes sense to me. Not much I would change for the regular AirPods, other than I guess the Max is the one the one thing that needs a lot of work. He also asked about MagSafe and MagSafe Duo. I'm not really sure what I can add to regular MagSafe other than I guess they could support faster charging speeds in the future, maybe better security with the magnets. MagSafe Duo, the only change I would like is USB-C. I think that goes without saying. If you just made MagSafe Duo exactly how it is right now, but gave it Type-C instead of Lightning, then it would be perfect. There would not be anything needed to change, in my opinion. That would be flawless. Apple Pencil, what is needed to improve for third generation? Honestly, I don't think there needs to be a third generation Apple Pencil unless it's just cheaper for some reason. Maybe it's smaller, it's not as glossy, and that makes it more affordable. Only potential Apple Pencil 3 feature I could think of is like if they made one Apple Pencil that could do both. So personally, I hate the Apple Pencil 1. One, because it's lightning. Two, because there's a cap on the end that you have to keep track of. And I've seen that in the real world, I've seen that be a headache for kids who are using Apple Pencils, and the employees or the teachers that are using the Apple Pencils are worried about the kids and their caps, and they got to keep track of the caps. The iPad 10 is even worse because you have to have a separate adapter and a cable just to plug the Apple Pencil 1 in. So maybe if they found a way with one pencil design to let it connect to the iPad Pro, but it can also connect via Type-C to the iPad 10, the old-fashioned way where you just dock the pencil in, it's not ideal, and I would prefer it if we just had the Apple Pencil 2 inductive charge method on everything. But other than that, there's not much I would change. I guess new color options would be kind of nice. But not a huge wish list for Apple Pencil 3rd gen. Also, similarly with the watch, I mean, I'm pretty happy with my Series 7, which is over a year old. I don't know of much I would change with the with the Series 8. I think it looks good. I guess I would like ProMotion on the watch, but that's probably just going to eat into battery life. Um, Someone did bring up that LTPO is available on Apple Watches already. That's how they have always on displays, but they don't go over 60 hertz. So I was like, yeah, maybe they technically could do 120 hertz on the watch, but they just don't because they realize it wouldn't be good for the battery life, which is a bigger concern on the watch anyway. Um, You are to me what MQ. Why do you keep saying MQBHD? First of all, don't spam messages. Thank you, J Money, for your support, but don't spam messages. But if you're gonna spam them, don't. But if you're going to, at least spell his name right. It's like you're copy and pasting the same typo. Dual boot option is not the correct way because you should reboot the device every time you need to change OS. My suggestion is to virtualize iPad OS on Mac OS to make it easy to switch between them. I'm saying come up with a way to do it. Once we have a way to do it, we can talk about making it easier. But right now, there's no way. Right now, it's like, I want to run Final Cut on iPad. Can't. No. That's what Apple says. It's literally not possible. You cannot do it. If we could go from it's not possible to it's kind of annoying that I have to boot between operating systems, that's progress. It's not ideal, but it's progress. And yes, I would agree. Over time, it would be nice if you could virtualize it and make it easier to switch between the two. But it's single nans. It's very fast read and write speed. With dual booting on the ARM architecture, it would reboot very quickly. And you could just have a shared folder that's like the files you put in here, you can access in the Files app on the iPad OS. So when you want to transfer files, you just boot back into iPad OS mode when you need to. But I don't think it would be. It may not be ideal, but it would be far better than what we have right now, which is you can't. There's no way to do it. High hopes over here for an iMac Pro or some sorts and some other options re Apple made displays. Yeah, the two options. I agree with you, Rackham Levert. There's right now. There's not too many great options. You have the crazy expensive and somewhat dated Pro Display XDR, or you have the Studio Display, which is basically just a 27-inch iMac display. Um, A12Z transition kit shows there's no excuse for no Mac OS option on iPad. I agree with you, James. There's definitely no excuse. Mac OS Highness says Apple Pencil 2 is already awesome. I'm an iPad artist, but would love to see how they could make it better. Yeah, I don't have a big list of things I would like changed. I like that you can double tap it to change uh stylus UI user interface tips or whatever. I like the finish of it. I prefer that matte finish. And the battery life's pretty good, and just being able to dock it on the side is so intuitive. That's the way I think Apple Pencil should work, and we need to wipe the Apple Pencil 1 off the face of the earth. AirPods 4 will probably just be AirPods 3, but U1 case speakers and H2 and maybe USB-C depending on when they come out. Yeah, that's a good theory, but I'm not even sure if we're going to get AirPods 4 in 2023. I'm not sure. They don't refresh the regular AirPods that regularly. They're not an annual refresh, and they're not even like every other year. Um, Luke Miotti said in his dev kit video for the Mac Mini had all sorts of iPad drivers for Face ID, etc. on it. It's only a matter of time before someone gets Mac OS on iPad. I'm sure Apple's probably figured it out internally, but it's not a capability problem. It's like a business marketing problem ultimately. What's up, Drew? I'd like to see you do a skit for Apple's mixed reality headset. I think I have at some point. What do you think the next Apple Watch SE needs to bring? The ECG is crucial design-wise, not really needing an upgrade. Yeah, I don't know. The ECG is also kind of one of those features that it's like, yeah, I mean, for some people it's very, very useful, but Apple tends to price the safety and health features in the higher trim models because that makes you feel like, oh, you need it, but the Apple Watch SE is like, yeah, you don't really need it, right? So I agree that the Apple Watch SE will probably not be refreshed frequently, and we just got to refresh. So I don't think we're going to get another one. I think that 2022 was a very big year for the Apple Watch in terms of upgrades. We basically got 3 new watches, 2.5, if you count Series 8. But the Ultra was the biggest design update the Apple Watch has pretty much ever seen, and it breached into a completely new market. So I think that means in 2023 there's not going to be much changes. It's just going to be a big spec upgrade across the line. Apple Watch SE probably will not even get a spec boost. So I guess other than ProMotion and in terms of watch OS, I would love third-party watch faces. I still don't understand why that's not a thing. To me, third-party watch faces actually make more sense than apps. I very rarely use third-party apps on my watch. For what the Apple Watch is useful for, the first-party pre-installed apps pretty much cover it. Like I use my watch as a flashlight. I ping my iPhone with it. I text with it. I check email. I use it for Apple Pay. There's not a lot of third-party apps that I find super useful for the watch. But if you could create a store where third parties could develop their own watch faces and they can submit them for approval. If they break terms of service, Apple can say, no, that's not allowed. And then the EU can regulate that in the future and say, no, you have to let anybody make a watch face on any Apple Watch. But seriously, like imagine a Tesla watch face and there's complications on the watch face that like unlock the car, preheat the car, open the trunk, and it was right there on my watch rather than having to go to the app on the phone or that kind of thing. Or there's certain watch faces that are really creative by third parties and developers can get really like interactive with them, and you could pay 99 cents to get that watch face. Like if you think that's crazy, well, I mean, Apple's advertising that you can do deep sea diving with a app that requires a subscription on the Apple Watch. So yeah, I don't I don't think apps on the Apple Watch make as much sense as third-party watch faces do. Jacob says, just got the new M2 iPad Pro. Any tips? Return it. That's my tip. Return it and get the 2018. Sorry, Jacob. I don't like the M2 iPad Pro. I don't think they're worth it. But J Money says, do I think that M2 iPad Pro could get a decade of software updates considering that the Air 2 got 8 years of update? Yeah, I think there's a good chance. I won't say confirmed absolutely will, but every year that goes by, it seems like Apple adds more software support to devices for a longer period. With Macs, they kind of tap out at around 8 to 10 years, and it's been that way for a long time. So maybe 8 years is the limit, and Apple doesn't break that. It kind of depends on how creative they get with iPadOS, which, if recent history means anything, they probably won't get very creative. So, sure, you may get 10 years, but I'm trying to tell you 10 years of iPadOS updates doesn't mean much because we've had 12 years of iPad now, and there's still no calculator app. Thank you for the super chat, Ben. Do you think we'll get a new Mac Studio, or was it a stopgap? Happy New Year's. Thank you, Ben. Happy New Year's to you as well. Way too generous, Ben. I don't like how many super chats you're sending these days. It's too much. Does the Tesla app have a complication integration with Apple Watch? No, but it would be awesome if they did. I would love that. Anyway, do I think we'll get a Mac Studio stopgap? Or no, is the Mac Studio stopgap? I think it is. I could be wrong. I don't want it to be. Let me be clear on that. Personally, I think in terms of addressable market, the Mac Studio covers so many use cases. Like, there are so few people that need more performance than what the M1 Ultra can offer. Especially if a lot of people are thinking, well, it's just one step up of a MacBook Pro. But you're forgetting that the Mac Studio is outperforming in many use cases the cheese grater Mac Pro. The $30,000-$40,000 Mac Pro is being beat by a $7,000-$8,000 Mac Studio. So when those use cases are being covered with such an affordable device, there's not a large market for people that are like, yeah, but I need more than the M1 Ultra can offer. It's like, I know they exist. I'm not saying it's no people, but the amount of time in engineering and tooling and factories that have to be set up and everything to make that market exist takes a lot of time and money. And that's why I kind of understood, based on the latest Bloomberg report, it kind of makes sense that Apple is not going so crazy with the Mac Pro. We thought it was going to be 4, M2 Max chips stitched together. Now it turns out, I don't think we need to go to M2 Extreme. We can probably just do M2 Ultra, and Ultra's good enough. But hearing that does make me wonder, well, if Ultra's good enough, how are you going to differentiate the Mac Pro from the Mac Studio? Because in my opinion, the Mac Studio, great device, kind of covers where the old Mac Pro used to be. The trash can Mac Pro, and not the new cheese grater, but the old cheese grater. When you spec'd those things out, they didn't really surpass 10 grand. The weird kid on the block is the 2019 Mac Pro that starts at 6 grand and specs up to 50 grand. Apple never really catered to that market before. And I'm guessing, we don't know the sales of it, but I'm guessing it didn't sell that well. It probably found a few niche buyers at first, but then after a couple months, I wouldn't be surprised if sales were very low digit, close to flatlining after Apple Silicon was announced. I don't know how many people would be interested in buying the Intel Mac Pro after Apple announced that they're going to be ditching Intel and that their chips are going to be way better than anything Intel can offer. Why would people be dropping tens of thousands of dollars at that point? If you're a techie person, you're going to be aware of the Apple Silicon transition, and it's the techie people that are buying that Mac Pro. So you could try to make the argument, well, maybe people don't follow Apple that closely. It's like, the people that don't follow Apple that closely aren't buying the Mac Pro. So my guess is that they've realized that market is too small to go after. It may be a little bit profitable, but if Apple's not getting a massive return on that investment, that it's just not worth going after. So that does make me think that the Mac Studio may be a stopgap similar to the iMac Pro, where Apple released it once to kind of cover the market in the short term, but ultimately it got replaced by the Mac Pro, and the Mac Studio is just a way to hold us over. I hope that's not the case. Is the cheese grater Mac still on the market? It is technically there. It is on the website, and you can still buy one, but I doubt very many people are. Jeremiah says, just got my 14 Pro Max from a 13, and I found out it's all about the island boy. Boy! I don't know why I read that way. But Jeremiah's profile picture has like a cowboy hat. So I'm just thinking of saying, it's all about the dynamic island boy. Thank you so much, you guys. All right, let me address these Tailosive Tech Pro questions, because you guys are asking a lot of good questions too. Okay, we talked about the watch. The HomePod, I'm not against the existence of a bigger, higher quality HomePod, but I just don't think they sell very well. I think maybe they would sell better if Apple just updated the firmware and allowed for more connectivity. Like if you let people connect to the HomePods via Bluetooth, and if you let people pair them with their Macs and actually, you know what? I know I'm okay, and I've been arguing for years why I want the iPhone and the iPad to not have headphone jacks. But if you're going to keep the headphone jack on the Mac and you want to sell a higher priced HomePod, to me it makes more sense to include an audio jack on those devices so that I can connect them to my Mac Studio setup and use the HomePods as my audio monitors. I think that would pitching both AirPods Max and higher end HomePods as tools for creating with Apple hardware as Mac accessories makes more sense to me than trying to ship it as a device that's meant to sell you on Apple Music. It's like if all you care about is Apple Music, HomePod Mini's probably going to be good enough. And if you're just looking at it as a home hub and you want it to be like your iCloud and smart home hub to monitor everything, then putting a display on there would make some sense. I could see them doing that. But I there hasn't been a ton of rumors surrounding it. So I guess my hope is just that if you're going to sell more expensive HomePods that are bigger than the HomePod Mini and offer better sound quality, provide better connectivity for them. Don't limit it to just AirPlay. Allow it to connect with our Macs or connect via Bluetooth, because that would open up the use cases a lot more. And I think the last thing Nate Tech asked about was Apple TV. I'm pretty happy with the last refresh. They gave the remote USB-C, they lowered the price, but ultimately the one thing I've been asking for from the beginning is just make it a stick. I don't want to have to put it into a box and then have to find a mount to mount it to the back and HDMI. The whole reason I'm advocating for the HDMI stick with the Apple TV is to fix one of the biggest annoyances with the current Apple TV, which is it doesn't come with an HDMI cable. If the Apple TV was a stick, you wouldn't need a cable. So Apple's like, well, the cable costs too much money. We don't want to include that with the package. Okay, then make the device the stick. And it's just got an HDMI port on the other end. You just plug it into the back of the TV and boom, doesn't have to take up any space. You don't need a separate HDMI cable. I'm all about less cables. Ideally, Apple could make their own dedicated TV and it just boots into tvOS, but we've been asking for that for years and it's never happened. So I'm still going to say the stick is a good idea and I want them to make one, but we just got a pretty great upgrade, so I'm not complaining. Stefan got an iPhone 14 Plus against my wishes, but I'm glad you love it. Is there any way to use a duo of HomePods in an iPad Pro external monitor setup? I mean, you can AirPlay to them, but there's going to be latency. It's not going to work very well for real-time editing playback. It's pretty much just good for watching content, but that's about it. If you were editing a video, the latency is so bad it's not worth it because AirPlay just always has delays. Ming-Chi Kuo said that the next Apple TV is going to be sub $100. Where did he say that? Ming-Chi Kuo is the one who reported that the Apple TV coming out in the fourth quarter of 2022 was going to improve the pricing structure. Those were his words. He never said sub $100 unless he made a tweet that I haven't seen yet. But I'm refreshing my Twitter right now. That would definitely make headlines. I think you're making stuff up. Or you bought into some clickbait that someone thought was going to happen. Thank you, Ice, for the super chat. But you probably thought I was going to read your whole name, didn't you? Appreciate the donation and saying that you love my vids. But sorry, I'm not going to read it. When did he say that? I'm not saying... When did he say it? When did that make it? Apple's HomePod plans what's in the works for 2023. I'm not reading it anywhere. He just said it would improve the pricing structure. That's all I can recall. But Apple doesn't tend to refresh Apple TVs very regularly. It's kind of bizarre that we got a refresh in 2021 and 2022. I know it doesn't help for you, Burkhart, to just say, he said it. Tell me when. Because I'm saying, no, he didn't. I don't remember him ever saying that. Tell me when he said it. I want to see the proof. Just saying he did say it doesn't convince me otherwise. He said that when the recent Apple TV came out. Show me when. Send me a DM somewhere. Let's see. Still on the infamous static peninsula over here. Would gladly jump on the dynamic island if iPhone Pro gets the Ultra Plus CU treatment. That's a lot of that's funny. A lot of people will take the dynamic island if it comes with USB-C. That's the requirement. But okay, it took me a while, but I finally addressed Nate Tech's question. Jasmine, who asked a bunch of questions, but they should take a lot less. Would ProMotion on a non-Pro model be enough to get you to downgrade to a regular iPhone next time you upgrade, since they have OLED and solid cameras? So I should preface that I'm not gonna like downgrade just for the sake of, okay, new iPhone has 120 hertz, now I'm gonna upgrade to it. Is like, I need to be convinced that my 13 Pro Max isn't good enough, or I don't know. There needs to be some use case that the future iPhone comes up with, and just having 120 hertz on a cheaper model is not enough to convince me to upgrade because I already have the 13 Pro Max. So if they hypothetically the iPhone 16 mini came out and it had 120 hertz, I don't think it will. But if it did, that wouldn't convince me to upgrade because I already have the iPhone. So it's like, I'm happy with the one I currently have. What Apple needs to do is figure out a way to convince me you need this new iPhone. But honestly, I'm using my iPhone a lot less ever since Christmas Eve. I was talking with some family and friends, and they talked about disconnecting and living more in the moment and what social media does to your brain and how it's not good for you. And after having that long talk, I realized that I was addicted to my phone, and I didn't like how much time I was spending on it. And I realized it was aggravating me, and it was making me in general just less happy. So I'm spending less and less time on my phone anyway. So the likelihood of me upgrading again for any reason, for better battery life or something, again, they're going to have to come up with a use case that's really, really competitive or really interesting, and probably something I can't think of right now. So they're going to have to surprise me. But okay, thank you, Burkhart. He sent me the DM. Let me find it. Let's see. This was back in October. Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, he does say it right there. Let me find this. I'm sorry, I didn't catch this tweet. You guys are right. I'm wrong. The new Apple TV 4K with a price drop starting from $129. This was in the midst of all of the Apple announcements. That's probably why I missed it. Reflects the expected improvement in cost structure. It can help shipments, but the drop should not be enough. The sub $100 price should be the sweet spot for. I expect the next gen will be more affordable. Well, okay. I think the wording is getting a little weird. What did you guys say? You said earlier, what the message I read, this is what I don't like when leakers do. Leakers get confusing when they start bunching in predictions with expectations. He said the drop should not be enough. He's making a prediction here. That's not quite the same as there is a next generation Apple TV that will be sub 100. He's saying the sub $100 price should be the sweet spot. Should be. That's a funny word we use in the tech community a lot. I expect the next gen will be more affordable. That's not the same as him saying, like what he said in the previous tweet here. Apple will launch a new version of the Apple TV. That's a leak. That's like, I have sources telling me this. That's not the same as I expect this one not to sell good enough, so they will lower the price again. I don't know. It's a little bit of a stretch. You're in California. Your brain is already gone. Hey, I mean, there's a lot of dumb laws in a lot of places. That's the one thing I've learned from visiting friends and family all across the country and all across the world, is that there are dumb laws wherever you live. Intelligence can be measured, with IQ tests and degrees, but stupidity knows no bounds. There is no way to measure the insane amount of stupid laws around the world. And California has a lot of stupid laws, but you are very close to the people you love and care about. At least for me, I grew up here, I have family here, and I have friends here that I love and care about. And we all get together and complain about California. And I have friends and family that moved out of California, and they talk about new laws that they didn't know about in those other states that bother them. And I will give California credit with the property taxes being lower than most other states is pretty dang good. That helps us save a lot of money, just not having a property tax rate that fluctuates as much as it does in other states. And being so close by to the Bay Area, to San Diego, and everything's being a drive away. You can drive to so many great places in one day. There's benefits, and there's a lot of cons, but There's stupid things everywhere you live. Michael Corcoran says, I think you should keep your iPhone 13 Pro Max another year. I probably will. I like at this point, I'm not saying I won't upgrade to the iPhone 15 because I don't want to like do what I did last year in the previous generation and just say I'm definitely not upgrading to the 14 because the 14 did have some things I didn't expect. And those features that I didn't expect didn't win me over, but I acknowledge that it's probably unfair of me to not even know what the product is offering and already write it off. Like, I will not buy it. I will not upgrade. It's like, that's kind of unfair. I should let Apple make their case. And if they surprise me with something and it turns out I do like it, I don't want to be forced to eat my words. Um, so I'm no longer going to commit to I will or won't, but it's all just dependent on how the 13 Pro Max ages and how good the next iPhone is. And those are both future things that I don't know about. I don't know how good the iPhone 15 is going to be, and I don't know how my 13 Pro Max is going to age. It may age great, it may age terribly, and the iPhone 15 might be a big disappointment, or it might exceed expectations. I just don't know. So I can't give definitive answers at this point. But I see what you guys are saying about the sub $100 price thing, but the wording he chose about using the word should and not saying that they will launch a cheaper one, he's just saying that the cost structure isn't good enough. So that's why I'm not. That's why I didn't. That's why we didn't see a bunch of headlines saying Apple will release a sub $100 Apple TV. He just said that's what I think it should cost, and then it would sell better. Which I agree with Quo for the record. I would prefer if the Apple TV was sub 100. But the fact that you can get the 4K one with twice the storage and it still has the Ethernet port, if you were worried about that going away, for $30 less than the last 4K Apple TV, and you're getting better performance out of it, and there's no fan anymore, and it's smaller. Like, there's so many great upgrades that I'm not complaining. It's a step in the right direction. It's progress. But to come back to Jasmine's question, would I upgrade for non-promotion? So to be clear, also, while I don't see a need right now, and I can't think of a use case that would convince me to upgrade from my 13 Pro Max, if the iPhone 13 mini would have had 120 hertz, I would have bought that. Just so we're all aware. It's a sunk cost. I already bought the 13 Pro Max, so it's not like a mini 120 hertz. Well, I got to buy that one because I like big phones and I like small phones. I'm kind of missing mini phones these days. I don't know if I'm just getting bored with my phone. I feel like that happens with everybody. And after a year of ownership or something, everybody just kind of gets tired of whatever phone they have. They'll just take a different phone, even if it's the same model, just a different color. Or they'll just change up their case or their wallpaper or something just to spice it up a little bit. But I already have this phone. I wouldn't buy a whole new one just because it was smaller. But if I didn't have 120 hertz and then a 120 hertz iPhone became available, if there was a cheaper way to get it, I would have done the cheaper way if it was that small. I don't like the 6.1 inch, so that's why I didn't get the 13 Pro. Jacob says 15 Ultra could be a super cycle with a new design, a new camera, plus a large SoC jump. Does that make you upgrading more likely? Not really, because I don't have an issue with any of those features. I mean, new design is cool. I would appreciate a new design, but it's not like a major problem I have with my 13 Pro Max. Is, oh, the design. It's so squared off. I can't take it anymore. And I love the camera on my 13 Pro Max. I mean, it disappoints me, so I should take that statement back. The 13 Pro Max does make dumb decisions sometimes, but I don't think it's really going to be... It's mostly like HDR crap and softness of the ultra-wide, but it's not... like the problem is with those camera tests, I just don't take a lot of pictures in general. I mostly use it for video stuff like this, and I don't think the 15 would be that much noticeably better, especially because mostly when I use continuity camera, I'm live streaming, so YouTube is compressing the crap out of it anyway. And the SoC is not a big problem to me, so nothing like just improving on what's already there is going to convince me to upgrade, in my opinion. Just like, it's a betterer camera, it's a betterer chip, it's a betterer design. None of that stuff I'm really looking to upgrade for. Like, to me, what would convince me to upgrade is a new use case opening up. I don't know what that looks like, but that's why I'm content with my current phone. Is like, I don't know. You got to come up with something, Apple. I don't know what it is. So I hope that answered Jasmine's question. in some way, shape, or form. But they also said, would you rather have Apple add lightning, white bezels, or a notch to every product? No matter how ugly or unpractical, you must pick the lesser evil you can stomach. That was a hard question. I thought about that for a while. I really hate all of those things. I actually don't hate the notch, so that's probably my answer. I don't like the lightning port, and they said no matter how ugly or unpractical. So that would imply you would have to add the lightning port to the Apple Watch, which I would hate. And the lightning port to the MacBook Pro and the iPad. No, gross. So while the notch is not ideal, I don't want a notch on my Apple Watch or my iPad, but putting a notch on an iPad or Apple Watch, as ugly as that would be, I would rather have that than white bezels on everything or lightning on everything. So I guess that's my answer. And then their last question on the subject of hopefulness for Apple. What has been your biggest disappointment from Apple all time, product and software lock? Interesting. Of all time, so not just of this year. I guess my answer would have to be, honestly, I know it's recent and that's probably why it's fresh in my mind and that's why I want to say it, but I really hate the iPad 10, like passionately. I'm very angry with the concept of shipping a product with Type C, but the only pencil that works with it is the Lightning supported pencil. So you have to use the adapter and a cord just to connect it, and you can't even use the pencil while it's charging. Like, that makes me, the fact that they were okay with that, the fact that they greenlit that is so mind-boggling to me. And I'm trying to compare it to something. I'm like, what was dumber? Some may argue that the charge method on the Magic Mouse is very dumb. They have to plug it in upside down and you can't use it while it's charging. And I'm like, yes, I agree, that's annoying and that's kind of dumb, but the battery life is freaking 6 weeks or longer. I usually get like 2 to 3 months of battery life in between charges. So it's annoying, but you don't have to interact with it as frequently as you do a pencil docking with the iPad, which, I'm sorry, that does happen a lot. There's a lot of times where if my iPad goes untouched for a while, the Apple Pencil needs to reconnect. So I got to just, thank God I have the Apple Pencil too. I can just dock it really quick and it reconnects. If I had to grab an adapter and a cable every time the Apple Pencil needed to be reconnected, oh my God, that would drive me insane. So I'm tempted to say iPad 10. How about iPad 3? I mean, the iPad 3 was, from what I recall, a boring upgrade, but not that insulting. It was just uneventful. There's a lot of uneventful upgrades in Apple's history, but that's not necessarily disappointing. In terms of biggest disappointment, like something that could have been much better that wasn't, I guess the state of iPad OS, if we're talking about both hardware and software, thinking back to how much more the iPad could be and yet isn't. The colors of the iPad 10 are pretty good, so that almost helps justify it. Scott's vote is the M1 iMac. Yeah, that was a pretty massive disappointment for me. Although, as disappointing as the chin and white bezels were, it was a pretty good deal. I got to give it that. Like the performance and the speaker quality and the resolution of the display as an all-around package. If they would have just not had a chin and had black bezels, but kept all the specs and the prices the same, I would have loved that thing. That would have been a fantastic iMac. Like, it starts at, I think, what is it, $1,300? You get a 4.5K display. You get pretty decent built-in speakers. You get a 1080p webcam and the M1 chip, and it's pretty thin and pretty, compact, and it looks, with my design in mind, it would look nice on a desk. Comes with the keyboard, comes with the mouse. Like, in terms of an all-in-one desktop, if it weren't for that weird design, that would have been, that would have been just a fantastic deal. So, other than my own biased and personal preference in terms of design, it was a pretty good deal. I can't say that about the iPad 10. For $450, that is not a great deal. I guess not everybody's going to use it with the pencil, so that's maybe the justification for it is like, well, as dumb as that is, not everybody buys the Apple Pencil. Okay, but if you're not buying the Apple Pencil, why? I'm sorry. You can find the 2018 iPad Pro for cheaper, and that's going to be way better in every way. Face ID, 120 hertz, stage manager, faster USB-C port. So yeah, I don't know. I'm tempted to just say iPad OS as a whole and just how negligent they've been with it. Um, or it's maybe not as good an answer, but I would say Apple not entering the EV space has probably been, in my opinion, one of the biggest missed opportunities of the most valuable company in the world. It's like the amount of change that could have caught on with that is huge. And the amount of influence Apple could have had and the amount of presence they could have had in the EV space would be massive, but it was too weird for them, so they didn't want to do it. Um, Jacob says the iPad 10 is so popular with the masses. Everyone on TikTok were desperate to get the pink iPad. Some were replying to me saying that they'd rather have the iPad 10 over a Pro just for the colors. Oh God. Oh, don't tell me that, Jacob. It hurts my brain. The iPad 3 is overhated. What? I don't I don't even remember what was wrong with the iPad 3 other than it was just uneventful. It was like, didn't the iPad 3 get Retina display? I thought it was like Retina display plus 30 pin connector. The iPad 3 was slower than the iPad 2. Okay, but it's an iPad. And it's an early generation iPad, so like who cared about the performance of it? No one knew. We didn't even have Lumen Fusion yet. I don't even think we had iMovie on the iPad at that time. No, I'm gonna get that guy that commented. No, true. iMovie launched on the iPad in 2010. 3D Touch going away. I wasn't, because of the current state of iOS and how they designed haptic touch, I wasn't that upset about it going away. I liked 3D Touch, but only because of the way it was utilized in its time. Once they changed iOS to not really take advantage of 3D Touch, then I didn't miss it all that much. Um, iPad 3 was the first with Retina, but the chip was pretty weak, so it ran pretty poorly. Okay, I mean, disappointing, but I wouldn't put it up there in like most disappointing of all time. iPad OS is great on the iPad Mini at least, which is the only iPad right now that actually sticks to the original purpose of the iPad, and I like for it. It's the best I would say there is in terms of tablet software, but in my opinion, even on the Mini, it's missing very basic things like optimized battery charging, calculator app. We just got the weather app. The fact that we still can't get those kinds of basic things on the iPad is very bizarre. Um, I like, why does my watch get a calculator and a first party calculator, mind you, and optimized battery charging, and AirPods get optimized battery charging, but not the iPad? Like, it just makes no sense to me. AirPower was a disappointment because it had come out in which it had been the perfect charger. I don't think it would have been that perfect. Um, I don't think that was that. I mean, it was a little bit of a disappointment that they couldn't get it to work, but ultimately, the more I thought about AirPower, the less sense it made. For one, it was objectively going to be way more expensive than MagSafe was. Um, in order to get AirPower to work, you are going to need what other companies have come up with now called freeform technology, which is where you have to overlap all of the Qi charging coils on top of each other. So to get three devices charging at once, you need like a minimum of 20 coils all overlapping each other. And that was objectively going to cost way more. And the heat management and the silicon you were going to have to put in it was going to be more expensive. And I think the whole reason they canceled it was because they couldn't figure out a way to charge the Apple Watch, which was charged very differently, or just a lot smaller of a charge coil than AirPods or the iPhone uses. So if they excluded the Apple Watch, they probably could have made it work, because there's this company Freeform that has made, yeah, Tesla has their own version of AirPower, but you notice it doesn't charge the Apple Watch. It can charge three devices at the same time, but they all have to be Qi supported, and the Apple Watch isn't. That's the big difference. And it's also free power, yeah. It's much thicker than AirPower was going to be too, because that helps with the thermals, and Apple didn't want a big bulky charger. They wanted it to be really thin, and it was causing overheat problems. So for one, even if they found a way to make it work, AirPower was probably going to be $300 easily, maybe more, just because of how complicated it was. And it wouldn't be as portable as this is. The fact that I can just, for one, there's a lot of loop bands like this one where my wife's not wearing her Apple Watch. When you have a loop, and if this was an AirPower mat, you can't just take your watch off and drop it because now the watch band was going to interrupt the wireless charging feed. So you're going to have to either loop the watch band around AirPower, which was going to be really awkward and clunky, or unlatch the watch band itself like this every time you want to charge it, or you can do what they figured out with the old Apple Watch charging puck over here, which I still use. And it's kind of set up in an awkward way. Can I pull this out? It's too far. This old one. The nightstand supported charge dock. I realized I could just unplug it. That's much easier. Come on, Drew. California's rotting my brain. Okay. You can charge it flat if you have a sport band, but if you have a loop band, you just prop it up that way and drop it on the charger like that, and it charges. So to me, MagSafe solves the exact same problem AirPower was trying to solve, which AirPower's solution was okay, or the problem they were both trying to solve was that okay, it's hard to drop your phone on a wireless charger and make sure that it's aligned properly. So AirPower was like, okay, we make a slightly larger than normal surface, but you can drop the phone anywhere on there and it'll charge. It's like, okay, that's one way to do it. Very expensive, not as portable because you can't fold it up like this and fit it in your pocket. AirPower would have been this big bulky thing. It's not going to fold up. And it's not going to support the Apple Watch nightstand charging modes. Not as good for loop bands and stuff. Or instead of making a larger surface that has all these coils overlapping each other, you can put magnets around a very precisely placed charge coil so that when you bring your phone to it, it snaps into place and then you get that animation and everything. So it solved the problem that AirPower was trying to, but it did it in a way more affordable, way more practical way that's a lot less efficient, a lot less prone to overheating, and a lot more comfortable for packing up, and you can fold up MagSafe Duo. So the AirPower was really cool when they first unveiled it, and I thought it was amazing, and I was like, this is the future. Eventually, you can make AirPower Max and have a whole desk that just wirelessly charges everything. But once I realized what that was going to take, how many charge coils were going to have to be overlapping each other, how much heat that was going to generate, I was like, it's just not practical. It's just going to be so expensive. It's just not, it just doesn't make sense. So I'm okay that they scrapped it. I think MagSafe, which it was a much better idea. AirPower's biggest weakness is the Apple Watch charging inconvenience-wise. I was suggesting for a long time before they even canceled AirPower, if you go back on my old videos, I was saying just put this type of charge puck in the middle or on the side of the AirPower. Just be like, okay, just have a designated spot for the watch, and then the rest of the charge mat can be for your phone or AirPods, and you can place them however you want. But they didn't do that because I guess it goes against the whole point. But magnets are cool. And MagSafe is also very, very practical for iPhone accessories. Martin is saying, hot take 2, MagSafe is the best addition to the iPhone ever. That is a hot take. But it's not a crazy one. I don't like immediately disagree with that. I have to think about it. It's like there's a lot of additions they've made to the iPhone. I mean, you're saying that's better than biometrics. You're saying that's better than Apple Pay. You're saying that's better than multiple cameras or OLED or there's a lot of additions that the iPhone has gotten that have fundamentally changed the way we use them and unlocked amazing capabilities with them. Continuity camera, AirDrop, those kinds of things. But I will say MagSafe is up there. Having built-in magnets so that you can just dock it with accessories or wallets or batteries, that makes it very, very practical for a lot of accessories. I don't know if I would say it's the best addition, but it's definitely a very good one. Or just flip the band around while it's on the watch. Even then, I did videos on this, Ace. When you flip it around like this, it makes it stand up a bunch, which means that the charging coils don't sit flush like they would on a normal charge puck. So it depends on even flipping the band around. I don't think it would charge very efficiently or very properly. So I'm grateful that they didn't go forward with the AirPower method. Also, it's just stupid to have the band up like this when it's charging. That's kind of dumb. You're saying adding MagSafe is better than 5G? Oh yeah, absolutely, for sure. Martin said, a hot take, iOS don't need to have theming and new UI design. Well, you're using that funny word again, need. Need is a weird way to describe it. Um, I agree it doesn't need it. Like, Apple will not die or lose market share simply because they don't allow theming and new UI designs. That doesn't mean it's a bad idea. I see tons of people theming their OS already with the Siri shortcuts and stuff. It's like people are already doing this, Apple. So if your argument is we need to keep the iPhone simple and easy to understand so that any iPhone you pick up works the exact same way, it's like, okay, but if people are modifying them this much already, I don't see how that argument holds up. At some point, iOS is really good in its current form. I have a lot of complaints with iPadOS, but I really like the current state of iOS, and I just can't think of a bunch of like fundamental great additions they could bring to iOS. But the theme packs, in a way of that's intuitive and simple and easy to understand, and a way to monetize those theme packs, I don't think is a bad idea. Let's see. Hot take: I miss iOS before iOS 7, like the classic icons. And I know a lot of people that say that exact same thing, Ben. That's why I'm saying a theme pack from Apple themselves that just lets you bring back all of the iOS 6 icons and control center design and stuff. That would be kind of cool. I bet a lot of people would love that and use it. Um, hot take: iPad 10 is actually great. Oof! Hottest take I've seen in here. AJ, I've not seen. Everyone I've seen make that claim just says to ignore the price, and that's what I can't stand. It's like iPad 10 is great if you just ignore what it costs. It's like, yeah, but that kind of is a big. The $50,000 Mac Pro is a very good Mac if you ignore the price. It's like, but most people can't ignore the price because most people don't get those devices for free. Um, Buying used slash secondhand MacBook Pro, what generation should I choose that is still good and not outdated? Ooh, well, that's a very vague line. I can't just draw a line in the sand and say that one's outdated, that one is not. Um, I mean, at this point, we've had Apple Silicon around for a while. You could make the argument that anything that's running Intel is outdated in some ways. It just depends on where you draw the line. Um, so I guess if you're talking about, like, I don't know how dated you're talking about here. Like, you could probably, if you need a cheap MacBook Pro, I would argue don't get so hung up on the term pro. Like, if you just need a cheap MacBook, the M1 MacBook Air is the best deal in laptop history that I've seen probably in my life. But the fact that those are selling for sub $900, and it has great battery life, great chip, display and speakers are good enough if you're on a budget. And because we don't know what the future has in store for macOS support on Intel based Macs, I have a hard time recommending anybody buy an Intel Mac unless your budget is like sub $500, I guess. If you're like, I need a MacBook, but I don't want to spend more than $500, I'm like, okay, well, I can't recommend anything with Apple Silicon because that's going to cost a lot more unless you go on eBay and just find some screaming good deal on one. But my guess is the 2016 MacBook Pro, with the touch bar and the butterfly keyboard, those have been known to have a lot of keyboard problems, and only some of them qualify for repair and service now. So I guess I have a harder time recommending the 2016, 17, 18 MacBook Pros for cheap. So I guess if your budget is sub 500, you could probably find some 2015 MacBook Pros for pretty reasonable pricing. And I think those still had the legacy ports and they still had the regular keyboard. They weren't on butterfly keys yet. So 2015, I suppose. That's as like far back as you can go. Oh yeah, the 2016 MacBook Pro no longer gets new macOS updates, but it just, I don't know what their budget is. They're saying they're buying an old one. I think that like the M1 MacBook Pro is not that much better in my opinion from the M1 MacBook Air. It's like if you're buying that kind of MacBook, I don't think you're going to notice the thermal constraints of not having a fan, especially when the M1 chip is very capable. And I did comparison tests. I reviewed the M1 MacBook Air and compared it in performance next to a 24-inch iMac, which had two fans to cool the same chip. they didn't perform all that differently. With like sustained loads, you're like, okay, the one with the fan holds up a little bit better, but if you're doing those kinds of long-term sustained loads, you're probably not buying this type of laptop. The way the market that laptop is for, a fanless M1 chip is still going to be fine. Um, Burkhardt says it's kind of hard to recommend MacBooks under 600 because the 2015 is unsupported and anything between 2016 to 2019 isn't worth buying. Yeah, I don't know what his price is earlier. So I encourage, if you want specific answers, did Burnt, is that who asked it? I think Burnt was the one asking earlier. If you want specific answers, ask specific questions. Like, is it worth it for this price or this model? When you just say it's cheap, it's like, I don't know what that means. If cheap is 2018 MacBook Pro for $200, sure, that's a pretty good deal. But if it's $800, no, that's not a good deal. M1 MacBook Air is a very, very compelling price. Um, let's see. No, that's not what it said, Brendan. Ben Rayner says, I still have a MacBook 2017, the one port one, as a second laptop. Oh, the 12-inch MacBook. Yeah, yeah. No, that's what my mom still uses. She still has one of those. If it's basically like another term for it you could use is the Safari Book. It's basically Apple's Chromebook. Don't use the 12-inch MacBook for anything performance oriented, but if you're just using it for web browsing, which some people just like Mac OS for being, basic media consumption. It's like, yes, it can play YouTube videos. It can play music. You can text people. You can check email. You can do your online banking. Some people just like having a dedicated, not desktop per se, but, the desktop version of the website compared to the mobile app. And you can buy 12-inch MacBooks for pretty cheap. I've seen them going for, what was it? I think $400 or something. Yeah, Nick loves it too. Every time he tries to FaceTime me on it, I hang up. Yeah, it's like if you just need a laptop for Google Sheets or document writing, really, really basic stuff, and you're not going to be doing any kind of video editing, audio engineering, or software writing or compiling, I guess you can get those for pretty cheap, and they're very thin and very light. Still to this day, the thinnest, lightest MacBook Apple has ever made. Way lighter than even the M2 MacBook Air. Excuse me. I saw a refurbished M1 Air at JB Hi-Fi here in Australia for $944. I almost bought it, but I wanted to wait for him. I assume that's cheap in Australia. To me, that doesn't sound very good, but in Australia, I bet that's very low. Good night, Kino Chino. Take care. My M1 MacBook Air is great. I think it's just such an incredible deal. It's very hard to beat. And once you start speccing up that M1 Air, you get so close to the 14-inch MacBook Pro refurbished or discounted, which is also an incredible deal in terms of if you need a more pro-oriented device because the M1 Air is just too dated. If you want more ports, if you want a better display, if you want a more modern design, that 14-inch MacBook Pro, for some places have it for like $1,500. That's a steal for what you're getting. It comes with 512 gigs NAND, very fast read and write speed, and it comes with 16 gigs of RAM, 120 hertz mini LED, HDMI, SD card, 3 Thunderbolt ports, full speed Thunderbolt ports, great battery life. Just that laptop is really, really hard to beat, which is why I have a hard time when people are like, well, spec up the M2 MacBook Air so that you don't get the slow read and write speed. I'm like, you're so close. You're so close to a substantially better. The speakers on the 14-inch MacBook Pro are also very, very good. That's Australian dollars. That's about 700 US. Oh, yeah, that's a great deal. Yeah, I would encourage a lot of people that are in the market. Like I've talked to people in my personal life that are like, I'm thinking about getting a laptop. I found an old MacBook Air. It's like $500. Should I get that? It's like a 2018 MacBook Air. And I'm like, that's the one thing where I'm like, I would really try to convince you to spend a little bit extra money on the M1 Air because I think that's just going to age substantially better. You're not going to have to worry about the keyboard like you will in the 2018 MacBook Air. And I know it costs a bit more, but you're going to get way better battery life, which means it's going to age far better as the battery degrades. You're going to get way more software support. Mac OS actually gets pretty decent software updates, unlike the iPad. Scott says, Ben Rayner says, the 12-inch is better than any iPad. Wow. Depends on your use case, I would say. If you're using it for note taking, I don't think it's better. But for certain use cases, I do agree the 12-inch would be a better buy. Hasael, thank you for the super chat. Can you go to the compare page and compare the 6 versus 14 Pro Max specs, then guess how the specs will look in another 10 years versus the 14 Pro Max? This is an interesting request. Okay, let me pull that up. I'm on the iPad compare page from the last video, actually. Let's go to the iPhone compare page. iOS 7 is going to be 10 years old next year. Oh, no, don't say that. Oh, my God, Tech God, don't say that. That's crazy. M2 MacBook Air at Costco is $9.99 until January 22nd. That's a pretty good deal. But what can you get? Does Costco have the M1 Air? Because you can get the M1 Air for under 900, and honestly, I kind of would still take the M1 Air at that point. The biggest difference between the M1 and the M2 Air is ironically not the chip. I know that's how we refer to it, but the M1 chip versus M2 chip, especially in a fanless design, is not that big a difference in terms of actual performance. Um, but the biggest difference is the design. It's just one looks a lot newer, but the display, while bigger and it has a notch and thinner bezels, the display is not inherently like that much better. It's pretty much the same nits. It's pretty much the same. It's close to the same dynamic range. I think it's a little bit wider color gamut, but yeah. I mean, if you really like the M2 MacBook Air, at least get it at a good discount. I would at least push for that. It's been out long enough that you can find it on sale in a lot of places. Has a larger keyboard. Yeah, but it also has worse speakers in my opinion. So you win some, you lose some. Okay. iPhone 14 Pro Max versus what should I do, the 6 Plus, or you said the 6, and we'll put the 14 Plus just for fun. Okay. If we compare the silver colors, not much has changed, right? Oh God. Thank God we got rid of the white bezels by then. We got my mom a refurbished M1 Air for like $850. I still would take that over a $1,000 M2 Air. Personally, that's just me. I don't think the M2 I reviewed the M2 MacBook Air and I worked off of it for a couple weeks and I didn't find it that much better than the M1 Air personally. It would be a lot easier to recommend if it was about the same price as the M1 Air, but for the most part, unless you find a really good sale on it with Costco or somewhere, it's typically several $100s more than the M1 Air. And I just don't think it's worth it. Okay. Oh, whoops, I clicked it. Available at authorized resellers. We went from 4.7 inches to 6.7 inches. We got ProMotion, always on, Super Retina XDR versus Retina HD. Dynamic Island, a new way to interact with it. They both had emergency SOS, but this gets crash detection, satellite communication. I like how they just list front camera. This gets autofocus on true depth front camera. Photonic engine, incredible detail and color. Pro camera system. Single camera, 8 megapixel. They did not say single camera back when this came out. There's no way. Action mode. I always forget that action mode is a thing. Be honest, how often do you iPhone 14 users out there use action mode? Let's be real. Scott says, I'm still jealous of that midnight color on the M2 Air, though. That's true. The midnight color does look pretty good. The 13 mini is smaller than the 6. That's true. I like the mini iPhones. It's a shame they're not doing more. But I did read an article about how Apple is seriously considering rethinking the iPhone 14 Plus because I guess sales for the Plus iPhone are just really, really, really bad, which is hilarious because if you scroll back to my old videos, I thought that was going to be the one that sold the best. It's like a big iPhone that's cheap. Yeah, that's what most people care about is the big phone. And then it turns out to just sell horribly. So don't trust me is basically what I'm trying to say. I don't know anything. I don't know why you guys watch me. What is the point? My predictions are always wrong. Maybe you just like me being wrong, in which case I should just keep making predictions. We went from A8 to A16 chip. Wow, it doubled. That's a pretty big battery life. I like how for the iPhone 6 it says optical zoom options 1x. Like, why didn't they just say no? There's no optical zoom option. But video playback went from 11 hours to 29. I think that's mostly not because of the battery being bigger, but also because of the ProMotion. You'll notice Apple claimed that the iPhone 14 Plus has the best battery of any iPhone, but when you compare video playback, the 14 Pro Max still gets better. And I think that's because the 14 Pro Max has an LTPO panel, which means that when you're watching a movie, which is what they do for video playback, it's playing it at 24 frames a second probably. So the refresh rate of the display can go down to 24 hertz, whereas the iPhone 14 Plus is going to be 60 hertz the entire time. So that's why in certain use cases the 14 Pro Max will actually get better battery life than the 14 Plus. Not in all use cases, but in some. 8 chip, nothing to write home about. 6-core CPU, 5-core GPU. 4G LTE cellular. Thank you for going into all that detail. Ceramic shield, surgical grade steel, compatible with MagSafe. We started with 16 gigs of storage back with the iPhone 6. Now we start with 128, which a lot of people still think is too low. Man. Yeah, no reference of HDR, True Tone, haptic touch. Why do they need to reference haptic touch still? That literally just, all that really means is hold down the display. Did they change that for the 6S? Yeah, 3D touch, but not haptic touch. It's just long press. 500 nits versus 1,000. Wow. Got a lot heavier though. Went from 129 grams to 240 grams. Yeah, no water resistance back then. No deep fusion back then. No stabilization really, especially on the regular iPhone 6. I think the 6 Plus was the one that got, yeah, optical image stabilization. Let's see. The M2 Air had the color, the dual charger, and the color matching cable, and MagSafe. The best thing ever. All for the same price of a 14-inch MacBook Pro. I don't know. Are you really crediting the dual charger as a MacBook Air feature, even though you can buy that separately? And you can get MagSafe on the Pro. So you don't have to spec up the MacBook Air very high to get to the same price as a 14-inch MacBook Pro. That A8 chip carried a lot of Apple products for years, including the Apple TV and the HomePod, which I still use regularly. They maxed out at 1080 at 60, which was a big deal at the time. I remember not that many cameras back in, not very many smartphone cameras could do 1080 at 60 back in 2014. But now we got ProRes, we got Dolby Vision, which I don't like. HDR is despicable. Let's see. Bring back the Mini. Hopefully they do bring back the Mini. I hope the Plus continues to flop. Let's see. I'm now looking at a new one for 1,349 Australian, or even a used base 14-inch MacBook Pro, which some are going for 2,000 Australian. I want the extra RAM and performance so I can use it for many years. I think those MacBook Pros will age very well. The 13-inch MacBook Pro is like its own category. It's called Pro, but I don't put it in the same camp as the 14-inch and 16-inch versions. Also saying 2x optical zoom for the 14 Pros is just a straight up lie. Well, I get what they're trying to say. It's like you're punching in and you're not technically losing anything because you're still getting 12 megapixels even when you punch in. But it is kind of a cheat way to say optical zoom. I think the way they get away with it is by keeping 1x, like, even though it's a 48 megapixel main sensor, it does not take a 48 megapixel image unless you specifically tell it to. You have to change a setting to get the main camera to be 48 megapixel. So by their logic, 1x standard mode is 12 megapixel, 2x is still 12 megapixel. So that's why they consider it optical. But yeah, I agree. It's a little weird. Quick Take is also a software feature. They could easily do that on older phones if they wanted. So many options. All the carriers, though. And Bluetooth 4.2 versus 5.3, Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6. Wow. We went up one generation of Wi-Fi in all those years. All these big changes, isn't that was the only one. Gigabit LTE. Why did we never see that anywhere? We didn't even get gigabit 5G. Okay, and then you were asking, guess how the specs will look in another 10 years. I mean, I guess higher. I don't think the displays will get much bigger. And I don't think the refresh rate will be as big. Like, I don't think Apple's going to prioritize 240 hertz because just a very, very small number of people can actually see that difference. It's way smaller than the number of people that can tell the difference between 60 and 120 hertz. Um, Dynamic Island, I feel like, is weird because they've boasted about it so much now with the 14 Pro series, and they're probably going to have to continue boasting about Dynamic Island once the 15 series comes out and all the iPhones have Dynamic Island. So even if they get the cameras underneath the display, I feel like they're still going to have an island of some sort. Um, like the notifications and the pop-up menus. There's still going to be there's via software or something. There's going to be some kind of pill up there. Um, Megapixel count in another 10 years will probably go up. I wouldn't be surprised if 48 megapixels becomes the norm for all three cameras or four cameras by then. Probably a periscope lens. Front camera, I don't see changing all that much. It'll probably continue to have autofocus. Maybe they'll do a dual camera on the front because they feel comfortable enough keeping the dynamic island. They'll be like, what's the rush in getting rid of the island because it's baked into our software now. We can't really get rid of those black parts of the display up there. Battery life is also kind of bumping up against the laws of physics. You can only make it so much more efficient and expect the brightness to be higher. So I don't think battery life will get substantially that much better. Like, I don't think it'll be 3 times better than it is today. Is the Twitter website down for me? I don't know. Let's check. I'm checking notifications. I'm on Twitter for Mac because I took Twitter off of my phone for mental health reasons. But I'm refreshing Twitter right now and nothing's happening. I don't know if that's just because I'm not following anybody. Let me switch to the EV account. It's still working for me. But that's Twitter for Mac. I don't know how it works for Twitter for iOS. Okay, Face ID probably will stick around. I think Apple could. The fact that Apple didn't bring back Touch ID for the pandemic, to me, is evidence that they probably never want to bring back Touch ID, at least for the flagship iPhones. They may keep it around as a cheap option for the SE. I wouldn't be surprised if... Well, now Ming-Chi Kuo is claiming that the iPhone SE4 has been canceled, which I hate using that word because it's like you can't cancel what wasn't announced. That was just an internal thing. They're weighing out options. I don't think that means they will never ever make another iPhone SE again. It's just one version of it they've decided not to move forward with. I don't use that. I don't use that term for internal roadmap changes and stuff. But I wouldn't be surprised if they kept Touch ID on cheaper iPhones. But as far as like the flagships go, I think Face ID will stick around. I'm sure the chips will get much faster in another 10 years. We'll be on the A26 chip, or they might rebrand it. They might just call it the iPhone chip in the future for simplicity's sake, or the Apple Core. And it's the picture of the core of an apple or something. 4 cameras. Give me that iPhone 3GS sensor for my retro photos. I am kind of starting to miss the rounded chassis more and more. I keep thinking about the iPhone 10 series and how big of an upgrade that was year over year, and how we'll never get that again. Twitter beta for iOS is still fine here. Just joined. What are you talking about? It's also weird to say that iPhone SE4 was canceled because there was definitely a 4th generation iPhone SE at some point. Oh, there will definitely be a 4th generation. Yeah, I don't know what they mean by that. There's like, is the report claiming that there will never be another iPhone SE? Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I do think zoom options will likely be very much improved. That's an area of the iPhone that, sorry, in case you couldn't tell what I was talking about. I'm basically going through all of the differences because Hasael asked me to compare these two tech specs and how I guess how it'll be in another 10 years. Not a ton of changes in here based on the 14 Pro Max, and, we can upgrade to 13 Pro Max or what have you. Look at all the changes. But zoom is something that the iPhone hasn't really expanded much on. They went from 2x to 2.5x, and then they went from 2.5x to 3x. But there's been a lot of talk about eventually adopting a periscope lens that can zoom a lot further. I don't think that's going to be ready necessarily for the iPhone 15 series, but in another 10 years, I wouldn't be surprised as Apple continues to look for how do we make the iPhone better? How do we make the iPhone better? Zoom is something that you can be constantly pixel peeping and chasing for years. Samsung's been doing it. Oh, this one can zoom in a little bit further. This one can zoom in a little bit more, a little bit more. So I wouldn't be surprised if in 10 years Apple's boasting about the iPhone can zoom in 100x and this iPhone can only zoom in 50x, and you should really get the Ultra because that gives you 100x. And it's like, how often do I really do that? It's not important, but as long as there's a feature of some kind for Apple to upsell, this is what this phone can do, this is why it's better. You need to hit a certain number of boxes that you check. Okay, new feature here, new feature here. And I think periscope lenses and extreme zoom is going to be one of those things that is very noticeable. I love the 3x on the 13 Pro, but let's be honest, most people don't use it and don't care about 10x or 100x zoom. I've run into more situations where I've been annoyed that I don't have the 2x button than situations I'm glad I have the 3x button, which is weird. There's been times where you get a better like depth and focal length when you punch in. I was taking pictures a couple days ago, and I liked being able to punch in before. But yeah, I do notice that oftentimes I'll be trying to take a picture and 3x goes a little bit too far, and 2x would be kind of nice. I don't think I would buy a whole phone just for 2x, but I'm just saying if my 13 Pro would have had a 2x zoom instead of 3x, I probably would have preferred that. Side loading is confirmed or not? Are you asking? Rushekish? Rushekish? Sorry, I'm probably butchering the name. It's confirmed to eventually be added in the EU. That doesn't necessarily mean, and we don't know how and to what extent. It's very vaguely coming to iOS, but yes, the law does state that they're going to have to support it in some way by 2024, basically. You should compare the 6 Plus to the 8 Plus to the 14 Plus. First Plus, last Plus with home button and latest Plus. That's kind of weird. It's just Apple marketing being bizarre. You probably read the true optical lens that LG made. What you think? Is LG still making phones? I don't think they are. But are they just making cameras for other phones? I don't think having a physical optical zoom that actually moves inside the phone, kind of what the Sony Xperia was doing, I don't think that makes sense. It's probably just a lot more complicated to manufacture, especially if you're building a phone with a lot of volume, which the iPhones are built at higher volume than any other smartphone. So trying to put in that kind of moving parts is just probably a no-go for Apple. But I do think that eventually they're probably going to have to figure out how to rearrange the camera bump to accommodate for all these lenses. I actually wouldn't be surprised if they dropped the dedicated telephoto lens for a periscope lens and just keep it to 3. I know some people are thinking they got to do 4 lenses so that you have your 0.5x, your 1x, your 3x, and your 10x or your 100x or whatever. But my guess is Apple is probably noticing, similar to what you guys are saying in the 2x versus 3x on your 14 Pros or what have you, just digitally cropping on a very large sensor is probably going to be just as effective and more affordable for Apple to just say, like, let's just have a really big main sensor that we punch in on. So you'll have a 0.5x, a 1x, a 2x, and if you go past 2x, then you activate the periscope lens. I think that's more Apple-esque than going with 4 lenses, but I've been wrong before, so don't trust me. Ayush, thank you for the super chat. Will the Apple A17 be based on ARM v9? That I'm not sure of yet. I don't know. I don't know if ARM v9 is ready to be produced at scale. Hopefully someone in the chat knows more than I do, but it's very generous of you to super chat. I'm sorry I don't have a concrete answer on. We've talked about ARM v9 in the past, but nothing I've read so far has said that they're going to be ready for that yet. 14 Pro 2X portrait mode is so underrated. I don't know if it's underrated. Do people realize that they're just digitally zooming when they do 2X? If it still looks good, then what's the problem? They probably don't realize that they're using 2X a lot of the time and that it's fine. I would have hate if Apple dropped telephoto lens 3X to 9.9X would look terrible. I just feel like there's no way around that. Like, okay, even if you keep the 3x, but the periscope lens is supposed to go to 20. There's going to be a lot of in-betweens where it's not very good. But I feel like if you're in that situation where you're zooming that far, Apple's probably right that, like, if you have a graph, okay, like if you took data, it's funny, I was talking with some Apple engineers about this one time. But if you took a bunch of data on when people are taking pictures and at what zoom length, you're probably going to get most people just at 1x, right? That's the most common photo. A lot of people at the 0.5x because you can zoom out, which pinch to zoom doesn't enable. And then when it comes to how often and where are people zooming in past 1x, you'll probably get a bunch of people around 2 or 3. 2 or 3x's in there. But then after 2 or 3x, you probably get a lot of zoom in as far as you possibly can because you're trying to take a picture. Oh my God. You're at a concert, you're at a graduation, and you're trying to get as close as you can, pinch in as far as possible, and then take the picture. Or you're taking a picture of the moon, or you saw something really far away. There's a plane going by. Let me zoom, 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 zoom. So they're probably right in assuming that the graph is like 1x. This graph is like what people are using on their smartphone the most. You got 1x here, you got 2x, 3x here, and then you've got not very much, and then all the way zoomed in over here, and it curves way up again. So there's always going to be in between the telephoto and the periscope. It's not very good, but that's where Deep Fusion comes in, and you use your AI to enhance the resolution as much as possible, or up the megapixel count of the main sensor further. But honestly, I don't think most people care about these things, especially based on when I go to big events or graduations and stuff. There are so many people that are pinch to zooming on phones that do not have telephoto lenses, and they do not care. Seriously. I was at this is the story I told on the podcast that Randy loves to bring up over and over again. I was like, there was a graduation ceremony we went to for a friend who was just, they walked across the stage and they were like, "Oh, Drew, could you take video of us going up?" And they give a speech and what have you. And they handed me their phone. They had an iPhone 11, which, as we all know, because you are all nerds watching Tailosive Tech late at night, we all know that the iPhone 11 doesn't have a telephoto lens. And he said, "Could you record the video of us going up on stage?" Very nice guy, very normal human being. And also, not in the same way I am. He's not into the computers and phones as much, but he's like into gaming and live streaming and stuff. He's not like a non-techie person. He's just techie in a different field than I am. And he was like, "Do you want to record the graduation?" And I was like, "Sure, but I can use my phone and then I'll airdrop it to you." And he was like, "Why don't you just record it? Like, we don't need this phone for the next 10 minutes. Just record it on this." And I was like, "Because this one has the telephoto lens." I had to be the actually guy. "But this one will preserve better quality than your iPhone 11 quality." And he's like, "Okay." Like, he was just in a hurry. And I was like, tired of explaining it. So he had to get going because he was going to go up on stage. So I took the iPhone 11, but I recorded the video on my 13 Pro Max with the 3x lens. So it was zoomed in and the quality was preserved. And then afterwards I airdropped it. But people aren't thinking about these types of things. People aren't like, "Oh, does your phone have a telephone? I need that one." It's like the everyday consumer is going to pinch to zoom. They're not even airdropping. They would rather take the same picture again with their phone just so they don't have to hit that. Where's the share button? Is airdrop enabled? Is it contacts only, or is it set to everyone? Like, people just do not care. Like, this is such a techie subject. Replace the lenses with one really giant lens. There's actually companies that have tried that, but it doesn't typically result in better performance, honestly, especially when you want different lenses to choose from. The multi-lens approach actually makes a lot of sense. Sell a telephoto dongle to attach. There you go. How about a MagSafe lens? MagSafe supported lens. They just dock it on the back and then take your pictures through there. Let's see. The only thing I want from the cameras is better colors and processing. I feel like the 14s is too saturated and warm for my taste, but I'm glad there's filters to tune to my liking. I need to mess more with those. I remember when photographic styles came out and I was just like, yeah, whatever, it's filters. But I have run into a lot of situations where I've taken pictures on my phone and I don't like the HDR crap. And I've seen people in our Discord. I apologize, I'm blanking on who it was, but people in the, maybe it was Jacob. People in the Apple channel on our Discord were posting all of these really cool pictures that they took on their iPhone, and they looked really nice and contrasty, which I care about. And they were like, I took all of these with the iPhone 10, and I was like, wow, like these look good. And I remember the whole Beautygate thing with the iPhone 10s. I was like, I think around 2018 was when Apple was trying to get into the smart HDR thing, and I feel like they've just never quite recovered from it. It's like, okay, it's not a bad picture, but a lot of the photos I took for the holidays with family and stuff, I'm just like, it looks weird. It just doesn't look natural, and it's hard to figure out, as Marquez knows, with all of us knows, there's a bunch of graphs that dictate whether or not a picture is good. Sometimes it can be more lifelike, but that doesn't make it easier to see. And sometimes we want pictures to be more well lit and to enhance the lighting so that it's easier to see, but that doesn't necessarily make it more believable or realistic looking. And there's different preferences. So I totally agree with you that it's a good thing that Apple baked in photographic styles, and I should probably mess around with those more, because I think I prefer in a lot of my pictures more rich contrast. And there's a lot of pictures I'm taking where the HDR just is so drastic. Like, this is really bright and this is really dark, and then it highlights your face, and it looks, I don't know, everything looks heavily filtered. And I just don't remember feeling that way when I took pictures with the iPhone 10. Like, oh, what was it? The picture everybody uses of me when they collab with me. Anytime, let me find it. It's a very old picture when Drew was in much better shape. If you just, I'll probably find it just by Google searching here. Yeah, it's right there. When you search Tailosive Tech on Google Images, this picture is, everyone always uses this photo of me when they collab with me, which I don't blame them. It's a very good photo. This picture was taken on the iPhone 10. It's a really nice picture. I remember when and where we took it, and we were testing out the cameras, and my wife was testing out the iPhone 8 Plus, and I was thinking, you just get a bunch of redheads showing up. That's hilarious. All these people are like, this guy looks like Drew. But yeah, like, I remember taking a lot of pictures with the iPhone 10 that I was very happy with. Scott, yeah, he's saying it right there. Some of my favorite photos I've ever taken came from the iPhone 10. Granted, I was in Europe with that phone, so the location may have something to do with it, but I still have one I took of my 10 on my wall. Yeah, I feel like pre-HDR crap came in. Humans do not like HDR. That's why we wear sunglasses. I got some sunglasses for Christmas, and I started wearing sunglasses again because I usually lose them. That's why I typically don't wear sunglasses, but I was like, you know what? Let me try this out. And it's very nice. And you know what it does? It gets rid of high dynamic range. When you wear sunglasses, it neutralizes the nit profile of your vision. It makes it so not everything is not so bright, but you can still see things that are darker. That's the point of fine-tuning, sunglasses and the polarizers and stuff. And the sunglasses I got still work with Face ID, which I'm very grateful for. Let's see. I think the true optical zoom lens makes more sense photographically than cropping on the sensor. The Xperia phone already have it. Yeah, but those sell at incredibly low volume, Martin. They are not produced at high volume. And frankly, I don't think Apple cares that much about the tech specy. Like, I want to make sure that I don't lose any quality when I'm at 5.5x or at 7.8x. It's like, that's, Apple needs something that they can stamp out tens of millions of within a couple months. And I don't think they can do that quite yet. Scott says, happens to me all the time. Can't tell you how many times when I do give people my phone to take a photo and they start stepping back, and I'm like, actually, just press the 0.5 button. They do not care. Yes, it's true. Yep. Or here's another common one. I don't know if you guys run into this in the family gatherings for the holidays. You getting together. Everyone wants to take a picture, but no one wants to use the selfie camera. They're like, how do we prop up the phone so that we can all be in the picture? It's like, just use the front camera. Oh, I guess we could do the front camera. It's like they don't even think about that. A lot of people forget the front camera's even there when they're taking a family picture. You know, the front camera is honestly pretty good. Um, let's see. Do you even know where we are? Are you even aware of the fact that you exist? What does exist mean? Do we really exist? That's a good question. The only thing I want from the cameras is better color. Oh, sorry, I read that earlier. Um, let's see. Ideal cameras would be 0.5, 1x, 48 megapixel, 5x, and 10x. At 48 megapixel, telephoto lens would solve the issue of poor quality between telephoto and periscope. I guess so. They might get to that point eventually, but I'm going to warn you, Jacob. If you want a 48 megapixel sensor for every lens, or at least the telephoto and the regular, that camera bump's going to grow much bigger than what it's at now. And you're going to hate what I'm about to say, but it's just a fact. It might be exclusive to the larger size. There's just no way around that. When the sensors take up that much space, look up the teardowns. When you look up how big the let me see, iPhone 14 Pro camera teardown. Let me find this for you. When you see how big these sensors are, look at this. Like, they make them all look the same size on the outside, but they are not the same size. To get a 48 megapixel sensor in there, it takes up a lot more space. Look at this. 14 Pro Max is worse than the vanilla 14. I like that word vanilla. So if you want all the sensors to be that big, it might not be possible to fit all of them on the smaller 6.1-inch iPhone. So they may restrict the best camera once again to the larger phone, because it's possible to do on the larger phone and not possible to do on the smaller phone. It's okay. We can copy the visor from the Pixel. That's what I'm saying. Thank you, Sung Imperial. Yes, copy the Pixel camera. The Pixel visor camera is the best camera bump design. Don't fight me. You cannot convince me otherwise, because I hate the wobble. There's a lot of times phones are left on desks and left on tables, especially when you're eating. And I'm tired of the every time. The wobble on my 13 Pro Max is terrible. It's so bad. And we all understand that you need to have some form of bump on the back in order to have big sensors with great image stabilization and all that. So if you're going to have a bump, that's the best way to do it. Zach is with me. Thank you, Zach. Zach Hicks, good to hear from you again. Do you have any must-have apps for Macs? No, it just depends on what you do. Macs are used for so many different things, but some people like to really spec out custom. I mean, I guess I use Al Dente for keeping the battery at 80%, but that's kind of buggy and doesn't work all the time, so I can't say it's a must-have. If you need a massive bump, at least that would be symmetrical. Yes, thank you. I like the Pixel camera design the best too. Google doesn't do a lot of things right, but that's something I think they just totally and completely nailed. And based on the camera comparisons, I haven't watched, sorry, I've been busy and not busy, but I've been spending a lot of time with family and friends during the holidays, but I haven't watched the smartphone awards yet. I think I saw the results posted somewhere. The smartphone awards are cool, but I don't see the need or point of responding or reacting to them, because it's one guy's opinion, one guy dictating the awards, and me and him probably agree on some and disagree on another. I don't need to get, I think Marquez should have voted for what I wanted. I don't get why people get uppity about that. But I did watch the blind smartphone camera test, and I will admit that even though I didn't vote on that, because the website, you have to vote through so many different things, I didn't have the patience to do it, and I realized that the result was probably not going to be that different from last year. The cheaper Pixel wins, but Google gets the algorithm for good photos very, very well, and I admit that. I will concede that in terms of picture quality, I believe that the Pixel takes better pictures than the iPhone. Is it substantially better? In my opinion, no. It's like marginally better. It's not a reason to ditch iOS, ditch the ecosystem, ditch AirDrop and Apple Watch support, and the resale value of iPhones being so good and the App Store being a lot more rich and diverse, in my opinion, than the Play Store. There's so many great reasons to have an iPhone over an Android. But there are advantages to using an Android. The other one I will concede with is that if you want a good display on a cheap phone, you have way more options to choose from with Android than iPhones. With iPhones, if you want a cheap one, you typically have to have a pretty bad display. Like to get a $200 iPhone, you probably have to buy an iPhone 10R with a LCD, and it's a fine display. It works okay, but if you refuse to buy secondhand, then you got to buy the iPhone SE3. That's the cheapest iPhone they have, and the display is not very big and not very vibrant. Whereas there are a lot of very affordable, good displays on Android phones that are OLED and high refresh rate and stuff. There's a lot of advantages to going with Android. I just think they tend to be advantages most people don't care about. um, let's see. I'm jealous of the Pixel's cameras. Please copy its AI capabilities and color reproduction. See, that's another problem I have with the blind smartphone test is that, okay, you're comparing the iPhone with its just native built-in mode, but the photographic styles kind of let you cater it in ways that would massively affect the voting results. A lot of people don't like the HDR, the compression, but you can adjust a lot of that stuff with the photographic styles, which means it would score totally differently if you just tapped a couple buttons. And all of the phones apply that. You can apply very small changes to all of those phones, and I think based on the result and how similar a lot of those pictures were, it was just a toss up dependent on what photo was used as the example, and it just depended on which example people were using. So um, I don't want it to be squared off though. They should do the rounded iPhone 10 camera bump blown up vertically. I could see that being weird. I don't like the current camera bump design. I didn't really love I mean, it's fine, it works. But the argument that the lenses need to be equal distant from each other doesn't really work anymore because they're not equal distant, unfortunately. Dovenus is desperate to hear my thoughts on Avatar. He keeps asking. I didn't like it for many reasons. Partly because we watched it in the movie theater, and every time I go to the movie theater, I'm reminded why I hate going to the movie theater. But I was with good friends, and we made fun of it along the way. So we had a good time laughing at the movie, not with the movie. But that's for a different day. We can save that for movie reviews. Thanks to 120 hertz and Apple's update support, I can hopefully hold out until we get a symmetrical bump. Fingers crossed. That would be great. If they redesign the camera bump again, we're going to have to buy all new cases. Apple loves that. They love us buying new cases, right? Come on. And also, Apple typically doesn't keep camera bumps the same design for very long. You know, we got iPhone 5, there was no camera bump. So the first camera bump really started with the iPhone 6. And it was just a little tiny circle. And a lot of people didn't even like that when it came out. I remember it was like, oh, that's annoying. I hope they eliminate that in a future generation. No, it only got worse. 6S, I think it technically did get a little bit bigger too. Very, very slight, but the 6S had a slightly thicker bump. And then the 7 got even bigger, and then they rounded the chassis into it, so it kind of blended in. And the 7 Plus, it started growing out horizontally. We were like, oh no, it's growing. And then iPhone 10, it went downward. So it was no longer a horizontal camera bump. iPhone 10, it's like stoplight design. That's what they called it. Kept that around with the 10S and 10S Max, although they did move it a little bit. The cases were a little tight when you went from 10 to 10S. And then 11, of course, is when they did the stovetop design with the 3 lenses all kind of the same distance from each other in the triangle. And that's still what we have today. We've had that since 2019. So we're kind of due. I haven't heard any rumors or any reports claiming that there's any accurate reports, at least. I've seen fake looking reports chiming in that the iPhone 15 is going to have the same exact camera arrangement as the 14, but then they just add another lens at the bottom. And I was like, is that Apple's way of doing it? Hey, Nick, how about a 15 Pro Mini? As much as we all want it, it's just not going to. I'm sorry. There's just inherent limitations, dude, when you want to build that much stuff into a small phone. But it would be great. Good to hear from you, man. Hope you had a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. But I feel like it's a good time to redesign the camera bump. And the best way to redesign it is just to straight up copy the Pixel camera bump. That's the best camera bump design. Let's see. What if they added the Apple Glow and the Apple Visor as the flash? I think that would get in the way a lot of the time. Apple doesn't like putting things in the logo. We've talked about this. The logo is just the logo. Also, it would make cases a little weird. You'd have to leave a hole there. I guess cases do that already, but Apple cases tend to not. The next series of Survivor, due to flagging ratings, will be filmed entirely on Dynamic Island. I actually watched the last Survivor finale. It was pretty good. Uh, excuse me. I have an Apple leather case, but it's starting to fall apart after a year. I'm not. I don't like any cases, to be honest, Apple made or anybody. And I was very disappointed with how terribly the Apple silicone cases aged and the leather cases. Neither of them aged very well for me. So I was just like, yeah, don't buy, just take care of your phone. If you really need a case, buy some cheap, I don't know, OtterBox thing. But spending 40, $50 on a case that after a year is going to be falling apart and basically worthless because you can't sell the case because it's broken. And when you upgrade your phone, it's not going to work. So you're just left with a box full of old broken cases. Don't spend 40, 50 a pop on those things. Get that. If you really drop your phone that much and you need to protect it, first of all, try to stop. But secondly, get the cheapest possible case you can because it's not going to last. Um, let's see. Issue with camera visor is MagSafe, especially in the not Mac-sized iPhone. How is MagSafe a problem? This would be less close to MagSafe. Let me explain why you're wrong in detail. Let me. Who said this? Phone pup. Okay. If you put if you keep growing it in the square in the corner, the square is getting a lot closer, as you can tell in this teardown, to the MagSafe ring. So you're limited. You can't grow downward forever because you're going to bump the MagSafe ring. If you start growing out, like the Pixel, and it's a visor design, you have a lot more room. You can fill up all this space up here. You got to leave space for the dynamic island, but that's not going to intrude on MagSafe as much as this design does. And as the lenses grow, the visor can take up enough space eventually until, look how close the camera bump is here. You could eventually get to the point where the visor design is taking up this whole back and then just leave a little bit of space above the ring. So volumetrically, you'd have a lot more space dedicated for lenses than what you have now, and you would eliminate the camera bump. I love my Apple leather cases. I will die on this. Otter boxes are not cheap. I've seen them. Neither are Apple cases, though. I've seen Otter boxes that are definitely cheap. Maybe just don't buy it new. The only thing I like about OtterBox is they give a lifetime warranty. Well, see, that makes it more okay. If you have issues with the case, you can get it replaced. I don't think Apple does that. I got the Everything Apple Pro case, and a year and a half later, the only marks are chemical caused, and I dropped my phone a lot. Cases can last, but it's hard to find the kind that do. Yeah, I just on top of that, the cases I've tried typically are not. They I don't like the way they feel in the hand. They make the phone feel cheap and bulky, and I just don't like the way they feel. What are the chances Apple will drop MagSafe? I would say close to none at this point. It's a huge selling point now with the wallet and the battery and the cases that are MagSafe supported. It's very useful. So I would say basically the other thing they could do if they really were running into problems with the camera bump is you could technically move on the larger iPhones. You couldn't do this with the mini iPhone, but at this point they're not making new mini iPhones. Hopefully that changes. But if this camera bump continues to grow, you could actually move the MagSafe ring down. And while that would be problematic for regular wireless chargers, it wouldn't be a problem for MagSafe, which is really all Apple cares about. They'd be like, hey, this new phone doesn't work with standard wireless chargers. Apple would be like, well, sounds like you need MagSafe in your life, because the MagSafe wallet and the MagSafe battery pack do not take up the entire back of the phone, even on the 6.1 inch phones. See, here's a good example. This is like a 6.1 inch. I don't know what that is. That's probably the 12 Pro because of the color. You could move the MagSafe ring down further and the wallet would still technically fit. It wouldn't fall over the edge. It would be a little awkward and it would be a little weird, but you could technically move the MagSafe ring down if you needed to, if the camera was taking up too much space. The Coder, thank you for the super chat. iPhone 99 SE Pro Max Ultra Plus with 20. Oh, you're making a joke. I see. Yes. There will be many funny names for future iPhones. I agree. I like the 14 Pro silicone case. First party cases seem to hold up better. Really? Wow. I mean, I respect your opinion, Ben, but I have had the complete opposite experience with all Apple silicone cases. I must have bought 10 or 12 different silicone cases over the years, and all of them fell apart. All of them scratched or chipped, and my wife has bought silicone cases, and they fell apart too within the year. And I have friends that bought silicone cases, and I see it anytime someone who has an Apple silicone case shows me their phone after a year, it's chipping, it's wearing on the edges everywhere. Ugh. No, I can't say from firsthand experience I have seen that at all. Um, Sam K says, I have a confession. I am an Apple News Plus subscriber. Why? Why? I don't get it. I do not use a screen protector, no. I don't like the way they look or feel. But I also I baby my tech. I take very good care of it. The Coder Pro also super chatted again. Thank you very much. Same here. The iPhone 11 silicone cases were so fragile for me. Moved from silicone to leather because Pro Max gets stuck in the pocket. Even the leather cases I had didn't age very well. They wore out and all these black marks on them and stuff. Um, I think they made the 13 Pro Max a little too good. I'm okay with that. It's a good problem to have. Shazam. Um, let's see. I appreciate Manuel asking so often what the future of the Tailosive Talks channel is. I've spent a lot of different. I've spent a lot of time over the past 5 years of doing YouTube full time as my job, working on other channels in the Tailosive network, and no matter what methods I try, whether it's live content, edited content, vlogs, or just thought piece videos, I can't seem to gather a decent sized audience for other genres outside of tech. I did find EV, but that's just kind of an offshoot of technology. I found an audience that's quite separate, honestly, from the Tailosive Tech channel that's interested in talking about electric vehicles, and I'm passionate about that and excited about that. So the goal of making YouTube into a full-time job, in my opinion, is being able to find a subject or a genre that you find interesting, that you can talk about or do videos on, that other people also want to watch you do. And once you can find that adequate balance, then you can make a living at it, and it can be very successful and work out. And you can enjoy what you do, and it doesn't really feel like work at that point. And I have not been able to find that on talks or on gaming or on movie reviews, no matter how many different attempts I've given on those channels. So I'm willing to accept my limits or my capability. And, it's not like I'm sad that I can't make a full-time job out of vlogging, because honestly, there's a lot of there's a lot of times in my life where, okay, we're traveling and we're having fun, but there's other times where we're just kind of settled down and we got family responsibilities to attend to. There's not a bunch of stuff for me to vlog about right now. So if I was more reliant on vlogging for my job or my income, I think it would honestly be a bit more stressful than just doing tech streams, tech podcasts, tech videos, which is just kind of based around the news, and I'm interested in that stuff anyway, so I enjoy it. But yeah, I basically, if I have something that is vlog worthy, I will make it. I'm not saying I'm deleting those channels or abandoning them. It's just I don't have any plans to post regularly to those channels because my current lifestyle doesn't really warrant daily vlogging, and I don't really have that much things to say on non-tech related content. Occasionally I get an idea and I write it down, but I know that the amount of time it takes to do a vlog is going to be close to the same or more than it would take to do a tech video, and the tech video is going to make 1,000 times more money than the vlogging video is. And I'm not trying to say that I only care about money, because that's not true, but when you have family obligations and friends that you want to keep up with, and that's a very incredibly good problem that I'm grateful to have. But when you make a lot of friends over the years and you're trying to keep up with all of these friends, it kind of just makes you busy. There's constantly people wondering when you can hang out, when you can talk, and when you can see grandma again, and you want to spend time with family and prioritize all those things. And that means that the amount of time you have in the day to just work, and of course I want to spend time with my wife, the amount of time you have in the day to just work and focus on yourself, which is also awkward when you're self-employed, because it's like, well, Drew, you could technically take time away from work anytime you want. So if someone's like, hey, do you want to come over? We're having a get together. I'd be like, oh, I got work. They're like, I mean, do you though? Like, do you have to? Like, you don't really have a boss or anything. So for those reasons, I try to keep myself working realistic hours that don't go forever and ever, because if I had all the time in the world, sure, I would do tech videos, gaming videos, movie reviews, vlogs. I would just, if I had all this time, I would love to do all this stuff, but I know that I got to pick my battles with the limited amount of time I give to work. And ultimately, not just from a money perspective, I know that I'm going to prioritize, I want to make content that people want to watch. And over the past 5, 10 years, I've made a lot of content that people didn't want to watch. And I just know that I feel less passionate about it. I'm less interested in it if I know that I'm making something that I'm not going to get much feedback on, or that no one is going to put, very few people are going to put much value in. Some people watch the vlog, some people watch movie reviews, and I appreciate the people that do, but when you only have so much time in the day to prioritize towards content production, I tend to lean towards the things that I know people will value with their time and I'll get responses on. And in general, I'm also more passionate about technology with smartphones, laptops, and EVs more so than any other genre. I'm not that interested in gaming. I'm mildly interested in movies and TV shows, but not that heavily. I don't think what I have to say is that interesting compared to what other channels have to say. So I hope that answers your question, asking what the future of the Talks channel is. I've got some ideas for stuff, but it's not going to be a regularly active channel. Doing tech, EV, and podcast is a lot of work for one man. Appreciate everything you've done. Thank you, yours. That was kind of you. It is like as easy as I probably make it look. I was talking to someone the other day that was like, you know, not not in a disrespectful way, but they were kind of asking like, why are the podcasts so hard? Like, why do you need to take a break? To me, it just seems like you take an hour out of your week just to talk with your friends, and boom, there's your podcast. And I was like, it's surprisingly complicated. It's not hard for one person to find a couple hours. For one, the podcasts are not 1 hour. That was the first misconception. The second thing is, it's easy to find one person that has an hour or two free in their day. It's hard to get 3 or 4 people that all have the exact same hours available at the same time. That's the really tricky part about podcasting, particularly when all the other guys on the podcast have jobs and families and lives, and we live in different places, and some of us different time zones. And we're recording 2 podcasts a week, both of which are usually over an hour and 15 minutes, and editing the podcast, all the time it takes to send the footage, figure out when we're all going to be free. Scheduling is kind of complicated because we all have varying schedules. So sometimes you pick a time where you're free for 2 people and then something comes up. Now we got to rearrange and find a time where all 3 schedules align is very complicated and challenging. And then the editing of the podcast, assembling all the footage, especially when certain people don't have internet that's as quick as others, and you got to download that. Like, Randy has the fastest internet. My internet isn't as good as Randy's, but Mike's is worse than mine. So you can only edit as quickly as the fastest upload speed. So it's hard for us to offload the editing when that's all dependent on whoever's editing's internet connection. So basically, there are easily 5 to 6 hours dedicated to the podcasts every week. Not 1 hour. And finding that time is challenging. So I appreciate the people that do listen and watch. When it's just me, it's pretty easy to find time to live stream or work on videos because I know myself. But when you're aligning with other people's schedules, that's when it gets very, very challenging. And that's part of the reason we can't have Nick on the show as regularly, is just scheduling conflicts, which sucks because we love having Nick on and we really appreciate Nick and we want him to be on as much as possible. And he's welcome to join anytime, but it's actually probably going to be a pretty big challenge starting up the podcast again next year because we don't know when our Randy's schedule is going to be totally different now because he's a father. Which is great, and we're happy about that. We're not saying that's a bad thing. I'm very happy for him, and I love all the pictures he sends us, and I love Randy, and I love his family. But it's challenging when you go from being, you know, married couple to now you have kids. How does that impact, and you know, people are working in that relationship, so someone's got to watch the kid while Randy's recording, and we don't know how the scheduling is going to work yet. We don't know when we're going to record, if it's going to move to the podcast might come out at a different time. um it's we got to figure that stuff out, but I'm just being honest with you guys right now. We haven't figured that out. We don't know. So I have no idea when the podcast is returning. um so hopefully that answered your question. I would love to see you do an Apple Sheep Overdrive rant about the iPad 10. Well, I kind of did. I did rant videos. I don't know if that counts as Apple Sheep Overdrive, but I feel your pain. It's tough to get all people in time and sync for podcasting. Yeah, I've definitely seen podcasts fall apart. And thank you, Coder Pro, by the way, for the super sticker. That was awfully generous of you. I don't know why it's a hot dog, but thank you. But I've seen podcasts dissolve and retire simply because they couldn't get everybody on schedule. Tailosive movie reviews has the best chance of blowing up if you review more frequently. You could start with Avatar 2 and go into 2023. No, I mean, personally, I think the YouTube algorithm starts to blacklist channels that are inactive for too long. I don't have proof of that, but I have theories that when a channel is inactive for greater periods, it tells the algorithm that this channel has a track record of being inconsistent, and because they're not consistent, we're not going to push the recommendations of their new uploads very regularly. So I personally think that by having all these channels that have been around for years and by having them sit inactively, that has probably damaged their chance for growth. So like, I appreciate Model Y Mike. I don't see him in the chat, so I don't think he's here. But if you're watching this, Mike, I appreciate you making content for movie reviews and getting together with my other friends, and us coming together so that Tailosive members have a place to share their thoughts on movies and TV shows when they make time for them. But if you wanted to make a movie review channel, I'm somewhat convinced that it would perform better if you started from scratch than if you just reused an existing channel. I don't think having those subscribers there is actually helping. Um, but there were times in the past, years ago, where I was posting to movie reviews frequently and giving my opinion, and I was trying essay videos or sit down videos or live streams or podcasts. I was trying all these different things, and I just could not figure out a formula that took off, even with consistent uploading. Um, so and it's a very competitive space. So I'm not convinced that I just need to keep trying different things, because I've tried so many things and I'm like, I don't even know what else to try. I've tried short form, I've tried long form, I've tried emulating the type of content that I like watching in the movie review space, and it doesn't work. So I just think it's some people are very good at reviewing movies and TV shows, and some people are, it's not to say that there are some bad opinions, but when you're in a very competitive space, there's tons of channels reviewing movies and TV shows. It's hard to find one that can separate themselves in some way and stand out so that people come back to that one rather than just going with the big guys. So I don't know of anything I have that helps me stand out or separate. So I just don't think I'm going to be good at that. And that's okay. I don't mind, because I think if I was reviewing content more regularly, I would probably just be a very cynical guy, because most of the movies and TV shows I watch, I'm not that impressed with. And I don't like the direction a lot of movies and series have gone. And I feel like the industry as a whole is just pushing remakes, reboots, unnecessary sequels. And the only good stuff is like hidden on streaming services. And I don't like having to sign up to all these varying streaming services. I like just kind of using the free ones where I can. So, um, Cryptician says YouTube algorithm is completely jacked up on all levels. They should have learned the lesson. If it ain't broke, then don't fix it. Well, it changes all the time. I don't think they necessarily changed it or tried to fix it. I think it may have worked that way from the beginning. Um, Jacob says, I tagged you on Twitter on an iPhone 15 Ultra concept with the camera visor. I love the industrial look. Ooh, I need to see this. But like, for the record, it's okay, guys. It's okay. Like, I don't need Tailosive to be like super successful in all regions, in all genres. Oh, I see. It's from the Apple Hub. This is their visor design concept. You watermarked it, but I can barely read it. Gun ho? Is that what he said? It's kind of weird. It's kind of all over the place, but it's not terrible. I don't love the screws, but I guess the EU would like the screw design. You literally put screws on the back. Let me just say, I know a lot of people that would hate this design. I'll be clear on that. But I should also mention that pretty much every iPhone camera redesign, whether it was the bump or the 7 Plus or the 10 or the 11, all the camera bump redesigns, every time it was leaked, everyone did the exact same thing that Hasael just did. Ew. Oh, that looks so ugly. Oh, that's so weird. Every single time, without question. There has never been a redesigned camera bump where everyone went, oh, that looks good. Oh, cool. I like that. Every time. The general consensus from 80% of the audience to 90% is all just, oh, God, it's so ugly. It looks terrible. So even if this was completely accurate, I would expect no different. Most of the audience would hate this. And they'd all think it's ugly. They'd all think it's terrible. And they'd all hate it. And then they would slowly get used to it. By the time the phone launched, they'd be like, oh, how much is that? Yeah, I think I'll get one. My trade-in value is pretty good. Yeah. And then you'd get used to it. So everyone's always against it at first. Which I agree, it doesn't necessarily look nice, but it would get rid of the wobble. And that's all I really care about. I would rather have this than what I have on my current iPhone. You know, this is the periscope. Your microphone quality would probably be way better with 3 holes instead of 1. Honestly, hot take, we don't need LiDAR. I would be okay if they got rid of LiDAR. That's just me. I found 3D touch more useful than LiDAR, and I'm okay with 3D touch going away. Currently baking some brownies in the oven. Can't wait. Ooh, dude, we got so much sugary desserts. I still haven't eaten through all of them. And we got them as gifts and stuff, all these cookies and brownies and stuff. And I'm like, oh, I just lost all this weight. But I'm trying to pace myself, but like, oh my God, they're so good. I have a sugar addiction. It's terrible. I'm trying to work on that. I like the metal rugged aesthetic. Yeah, it definitely does look ultra reminiscent. You know what? I'm going to give that a good old, like, it very much looks like the Apple Watch Ultra does. Which, you know, the Apple Watch Ultra did well, so why not keep that going? I wouldn't buy a new phone just for that alone, but it does look nice. I didn't think most people now, knowing how big the camera bumps are, everyone thinks the iPhone 10 camera bump is totally normal, totally fine. No one bats an eye at the iPhone 10 camera bump. It's just a stoplight, just 2 lenses straight up and down. I kid you not. I remember the day that bump leaked in 2017, and there were rumors going around, here's the new iPhone 10 camera bump. All the comments were negative. So many people were just like, oh my God, it looks like every Android phone. I hate it so much. It's so ugly. It's so terrible. I hate it. I hope it's fake. Everyone hated that basic just camera bump used to be this way. Now it's this way. The audience is all freaked out. And it was like, that was nothing compared to these types of bumps where it's like, oh my God, that's horrifying, but also kind of possible. You know, if they added the periscope lens, it would need to kind of look like that, to be honest. What's going on with the flash? I guess it's just big. It's just a huge flash, and maybe the Ultra allows for better. The iPhone Ultra gives you a super bright flashlight. Maybe that could be a new improvement. I didn't hear anything legit talking about Tim Cook resignation. Sorry. I'm going to my grandmother's house to watch The Godfather, so I made brownies. That's awesome. Hang out as much as you can with your grandma. Let's see. Whatever it takes to make Drew upgrade to the next iPhone. Oh, I'm going to do some things you guys don't like. Why not make the periscope lens vertical? Because it would eat into the, I don't know, telephoto lens. Why not make it? I don't know, just either way, it's going to look weird. Whether this is up and down or side to side, it's going to look bizarre. This is more dynamic island looking, I guess. Honestly, I would rather them black out the whole thing rather than just make the lenses black. But that's just me. That's not terrible as far as concept art for periscope lenses. It eliminates the wobble. It is well enough, adequate, big enough for the camera. But, there's a lot of concept art that's just like, so on my design, we just eliminated the camera bump and it's flush on the back. It's like, okay, great. Does it also fart out gold coins? What am I looking forward to the most with Apple for 2023? Asks Drew. Okay. I guess, I mean, for my own personal interest, I'm very, very interested in a new standalone monitor. I would like either a pro version of the studio display or a cheaper version of the pro display. I want something because I'm still roughly in the market for an external monitor. I just want it to be reasonably priced and have similar display specifications as my MacBook Pro. And they still haven't delivered on that. So for my own personal buying experience, like even if I wasn't in the YouTube space, I would be kind of curious what they're going to do with that. In terms of just as a fan, I can admire Apple and I could be excited for what Apple's going to release, even if I'm not the target demographic for it. Like I think AirTags are really cool, and I followed the release of AirTags. I don't need them, but I was interested as a fan, just kind of watching tech as others may watch the news or watch sports or something. As a tech community viewer, I'm most interested to see what happens with the iPhone 15, because I do think in the tech community, at least, the switch to USB-C is a pretty big deal. Even for average consumers, I think that's going to be a pretty big deal. Not all average consumers are probably going to be on board with it. I bet a bunch of average consumers are going to be like, "What? The Lightning doesn't work anymore now," and everyone's going to be talking about it. It's going to be all over the news. You got to do a different cable for the new iPhone. I feel like finding out whether or not Apple's going to do that globally or just in the EU, or they're going to do it this year or next year, which makes sense. That's how the tech community is. The iPhone videos usually do better than all the other channels because most people buy phones. Not most people. Most people don't buy laptops. The most popular tech product is the phone. So news surrounding the phone is the most interesting. So the EDM Dragon, that's a funny name. Thank you for the super chat. He says, it looks like an Android phone was exactly my first impression of the iPhone 10. I got to find the comments for it somewhere. I know they exist. I know they're out there, but it looks exactly like an Android phone. I think it was on, let me look for a second. I got to wrap up here soon. It's time for dinner. My wife's probably wondering what I'm doing. Was it Venya Geskin? Let me see if I can remember this. It was a short, I think, too. Does YouTube still let you sort by oldest? No, they don't because they suck. No, it's not on his channel. Maybe that's a different one. Other channels. There was a video. I won't search for who I thought did it. Let me just search iPhone 8 leaked design. Let me see if you can find it. There was like a short iPhone 8 dummy. It was a short video. It was vertical. Yeah, it was this thing. Greg's Gadgets is reporting on it there, but this is not. Okay. iVenue. I think that's it. I think this is it. Okay, let me go to the comments. Here's all the comments. Let's just remove the home button and flip the camera. They'll still buy it. See, everyone hates that the camera. After Steve died, there hasn't been a revolutionary upgrade. Everybody's going. I feel so lost without the home button anymore. Someone told me. Let's see. This phone looks amazing, and people are hating for attention. Oh, that's me. Wait, I like the new design. Let's flip the camera and give it one of those glass backs like those Samsung phones. Much innovative, very creative. Ah, yes, darn Samsung, high quality. Let me catch up. Just gonna stay. What, Tim Cook? What are you doing? Let's flip the camera. Did they post the same comment like over and over? These mostly bots, I think. Oh, the comments looped. That's weird. Okay, I can't find the comments about it being Android, but there's a lot of people just saying, "Oh, the camera's flipped. Not that big a deal." So this was literally the biggest iPhone redesign of all time, and as you can see, people all considered it not that big an upgrade. So bring back the home button. Well, it's on the SE. But anyway, I really appreciate the super chats, and I love chatting with you guys. I apologize if you're wanting more edited videos, but I'll be honest, there's no need for me to lie on this. The tech news is pretty dry right now. And I'm okay with that. But when the tech news is dry, I'm more comfortable doing these live streams because I don't have to try to guess what you guys are most interested in. We can just talk in real time about what is fun for us, and it's a lot easier for me than filming, editing, and uploading and all those steps involved. So I love doing the live streams, and when the tech news is dry, I'll probably do more of them. But just keep in mind, I'm very open to suggestions. If you don't have anything, that's fine too. But just expect more live streams when the news is dry like this, which I'm fine with. This is fun. I enjoy this too. Thankfully, because of your guys' continued support, especially crazy supporters like people who signed up for Tailosive Tech Ultra, Tyler Forte, Riley McGinnis, because of your guys' extreme generosity, it doesn't matter if the tech news is dry. I don't need to have my channel perform a certain way for us to pay the bills. We're perfectly happy with the off season, the dry season. I got no problem with that. And I just want to thank you guys again for allowing me to have this dream of a job. And I'll see you all again very, very soon. Take care. Bye bye.